All right. Hi guys, how's the audio and video? Quickly confirm in the chat. Perfect. It's good. All right. Hi guys, how's it going? I hope your preparations are going in full swing, and I'm here to help a little in that. Let's get started. Let's revise FSA today. We're going to primarily do three readings. First is going to be your analysis of inventories. That's the first reading that is the idea. Just hold on for a second. Yeah. So the first reading that we are going to do is the inventory reading, analysis of inventory. Second that we are going to do is analysis of long-term assets. And the third one that we are going to do is your income taxes, which everyone, I guess, here would have some or the other trouble, doing it. All right. Okay. So I hope my audio and video is clear. And one more thing, we should set some rules. Guys, this is a revision lecture. So obviously, I'm not going to go in as much detail as what I generally do in my lectures. All right. Also, they are pretty detailed. Please do check them out. Anyway, what I was saying is that I don't go in that kind of detail. So the point is that, it's a revision. So I'll make sure that I summarize things very well, but not to an extent where, things are just going afloat. So I'll make sure that you guys understand things, but not at a granular level, but at a macro level. All right. Anyway, so let's get started with our first reading, which is going to be analysis of inventories, the simplest reading in your CFA level one, I feel, except for a few parts here and there. I think this reading is pretty scoring and very, very simple. All right. The first, all right, I guess, okay. So no comments. Anyway, so the first part that we're going to start and discuss is going to be, sir, how do you measure an inventory? How do you measure the inventory? So we're going to talk about the measurement of inventory. All right. Let's get started. Also, sorry for my handwriting. You know how it is. I think majority of the people in the chat would be my students, so you know how my handwriting is. So please forgive me for that. But I will make sure that I write things. I sort of dictate it when I'm writing so that you understand it very well. All right, let's get started. Let's talk about measurement of inventory. All right. Now it's a very important thing. Whatever is the difference between, I hope you guys have pointed them out already. If not, we will point them out today. What exactly is the difference in IFRS and US GAAP? Also, that we will be discussing. So don't worry. I'll make sure that I point them out. All right. Let's get started. Let's talk about measurement of inventory. Of course, sir, measurement of inventory differs in what? In IFRS, it is different. And in US GAAP, it is different. All right. Let's get started with IFRS. All right. Let's get started with IFRS. How exactly is the inventory valued in case of IFRS? In case of IFRS, inventory is valued at a very simple or by a very simple rule called as cost or NRV, whichever is lower. Right. That's how your inventory is measured. It is going to be cost or NRV, whichever is lower. Sir, we do understand cost. Cost is what? Cost is something that we have incurred to purchase that good or to manufacture that good. Okay, we do understand that fact. Sir, what do you mean by NRV? NRV means net realizable value. What am I going to realize out of that asset? Okay, sir, what am I going to realize out of that asset? Whatever is the selling price minus the selling cost that I incur in order to sell that good. Ultimately, that is what I realize from selling that asset. All right, fair enough. So that is what NRV is. But sir, what if the product that I'm trying to sell, the goods that I'm trying to sell, what if they are not manufactured? Sir, they are yet to be manufactured. There are few things that I'm yet to do with them so that they're completely ready for sale. Basically, sir, there are going to be certain completion costs that I'm going to incur. There are going to be certain costs that I'm going to incur to be able to completely make it ready for sale. Okay, that is also going to be incurred. So, should that be considered a net realizable value for a kind of a good which is ultimately not yet manufactured? Yes, I should consider that, and that would be called as completion cost. So whenever I'm finding NRV, there are two types of goods that I'm dealing with. One that is already finished and something that is incomplete or yet to be ready for manufacture. Sir, if something that is already finished, how do I find out NRV? It is pretty simple. Whatever my selling price is minus the selling cost. But the point is, have I sold it yet? No. So I will have to estimate both. I will have to find out my estimated selling price and estimated selling cost in order to be arriving at NRV. Sir, but what if the goods are incomplete? What do I do? In that case, I take estimated selling price minus the estimated selling cost. But remember, I have to incur more money from my pocket to complete that. And net realizable value is what do you realize in net. So if something is going out of the pocket, that would also be considered in that calculation. And ultimately, you deduct that as well. So the point is that you deduct your estimated completion costs here as well. And you get your NRV. So there are two types of goods that we deal with, finished and incomplete. And the point is that's how you calculate NRV. And NRV is estimated selling price minus estimated selling cost in case of finished goods. And in case of goods that are not yet finished, incomplete, you take estimated selling price minus estimated selling cost minus completion costs. Okay, sir, fair enough. That's what we do. So we measure it at cost or NRV, whichever is lower. We do get that. That's fine. It's easy to understand. But what if, sir, the cost is lower than NRV? The cost is actually lower than NRV. My cost is 100, but my NRV is 90. That means what? That means I will have to write down my inventory because inventory is measured as per IFRS at cost or NRV, whichever is lower. So what do? I will have to write down my inventory. Currently, inventory in my goods in my books is shown at what? It's shown at 100. So 100 is what is what it is shown at. That is what it is. All right, sir. 100 is what it is shown as. But ideally, sir, NRV is lower, so it should be shown at 90. So, sir, from 100, I have to bring the value of inventory down to 90. That means 10 rupee is my loss in the value of asset, which is inventory. Right. So whenever there is a write down, that means NRV is actually greater than the carrying value. In our case, it was 100. Sorry, in our case, sorry, inventory is NRV is lower than the carrying value. So in NRV is 90 and carrying value is 100. Okay, so inventory is going to be written down. Fair enough, sir. There is going to be 10 rupees loss in the value of the asset. Okay, how do I recognize that loss? What do I do to recognize that loss? Sir, you can record it as a separate line item in the income statement. So whenever I'm making my income statement, just recognize loss in because of write down in inventory. So I can record that as a separate line item. But at the end of the day, loss is what? An expense, right? At the end of the day, loss is what? An expense. It is going to reduce my income. Okay, so that is the first way. Sir, what is the other way we can adjust the COGS? We can adjust the COGS, cost of goods sold. And what happens when you're finding the profit or loss of a company? You deduct the COGS. Okay. So, sir, as a result of loss in the value of inventory of 10 rupees, my profit should go down because if I recognize as a separate line item, it is a loss, which is an expense, and my profit goes down. When I'm adjusting the same loss in the COGS, what should I do? I should increase the COGS. Why? Because it is deducted. And whenever you increase something that is deducted, your profit goes down. That is how you adjust. So you don't have to remember this. You just have to remember, sir, you're just in COGS. What to do in COGS? Should we increase or decrease the COGS? Sir, COGS is subtracted from my revenue to calculate my profit or loss. So ideally, sir, I should increase the COGS so that my profit goes down. Okay. So I don't need to remember increasing COGS. I just need to remember COGS. That's it. That's all. That is what it is. Sir, I have written down the inventory to what? 90. So now inventory is going to be shown at 90 in my books of accounts. It is going to be shown at 90 because it was reduced from 100 to 90 because NRV is ultimately lower. Now the inventory exists at 90 rupees in my books of accounts. But tomorrow, what if the value of inventory increases? That means NRV increases. Sir, the selling price that I estimated was actually wrong. I was estimating that I'm going to get an X amount, but I feel now that I'm going to get an X, I'm going to get X plus 10%, X plus 20%, whatever that may be. The NRV actually now from 90 goes up to 110. That is what the NRV is. Sir, but originally we recognized the inventory at 100 rupees, then we recognized at 90, and now you're saying the value of that inventory, which is NRV, is gone up to 110. What to do? Can I reverse the loss earlier that was recognized earlier? Yes, I can reverse that loss. Sir, so are you telling me that the value of inventory should go up by 20? No, it should only go up to the extent of the cost of the asset. Meaning, I can only recognize 10 rupee of reversal. So that means only to the extent of original cost of the asset, not more than that, even if the NRV is more than that. NRV is 110. Subsequently, original cost was 100. I have recognized the asset in the books at 90. Ideally, the NRV has increased from 90 to 110. I should be reversing the loss that I earlier recognized in the value of inventory. But the reversal, sir, what should be the amount of reversal? That is the question. It should only be to the extent of what? To the extent of the original cost of the asset. And original cost of the asset is how much? 100. So I can only reverse 10 rupees, that I can increase the value of the inventory only by 10 rupees. Sir, earlier it was at 100, then you reduced it to 90. Now are you telling me that you need to increase it back to 100? Yes, that's what I will do. I will increase the value of inventory back to 100. So that means, are you telling us that it's a profit? Earlier you recognized 10 rupees as a loss. This is a profit? Yes, it's a profit. It's a gain. How do you recognize this gain? Sir, earlier I was recognizing loss as a separate line item, or I was adjusting in COGS. Exactly like that, I can recognize this gain as a separate line item or by reducing the COGS, because earlier I was increasing the COGS. And I hope you guys understand this. You don't again need to remember COGS badega ya kam hoga, it will increase or decrease. What can you do? You can simply remember the logic. Sir, it is a gain. Gain should increase my profit and loss. So, sir, ideally COGS is something that is subtracted. So, if I have to increase my profit or loss, I have to lower the COGS so that ultimately my profit increases. That is how you think about it. You don't remember these things. So, sir, logically, what did we understand, sir? We understood. We started with IFRS. We were talking about inventory valuation of IFRS. Sir, what value the inventory is recognized in IFRS? Sir, it is at cost or NRV, whichever is lower. Sir, how exactly is cost computed? Cost is computed as whatever the estimated selling price is minus the estimated selling cost minus what, the estimated completion cost, if the good is not ready yet to sell. Okay, sir, that is what I do. We understand this. Sir, what if there is a write down? Cost is actually lower than NRV. Cost is 100, NRV is 90. Okay, sir, 10 rupees should be 10 rupees should be reduced from the value of the inventory. Yes. That means it's a loss in the value of inventory. Yes. How would I recognize that loss? Sir, first I will reduce the inventory from 100 to 90. Sir, what about the 10 rupees of loss? I will show it in income statement as a separate line item or increase COGS. Because it's a loss, it will reduce the profit. And because it will reduce the profit, you are adjusting in COGS. What will happen to COGS? You will increase the COGS so that ultimately the profit goes down. That's how you think. And the second part, what I was talking about is ultimately, sir, what if there is a subsequent reversal in the value of the inventory? Or now in the books, my value of the inventory is 90 rupees. What if the value of inventory goes to 110? Sir, if it goes to 110, I can reverse because there's an improvement in the value. But sir, to what extent? What is the amount of reversal? Sir, the reversal has to be only to the extent of the value of inventory originally recognized, which is 100. तो सर 90 से मैं कहाँ लेके जाऊंगा? Tops to tops 100 rupees. So I will increase the value of inventory maximum by 10 rupees. That is called as reversal. And reversal in loss is what? It is a gain. And gain can be recognized in two ways, exactly like how you could recognize loss, either as a gain, either as a separate line item, or what? By decreasing the COGS. I hope you guys are getting me. I hope you guys are with me so far. And we will discuss an example right now. But I hope you guys are with me. Say yes or no in the chat box quickly. All right, let's take an example, guys. The original cost of the inventory is how much? Is $50,000. NRV is how much? $45,000. NRV is how much? $45,000. Sir, in IFRS, how do you evaluate inventory? The cost or NRV, whichever is lower. Sir, cost is how much? 50K. Sir, NRV is how much? 45K, whichever is lower. Sir, that means the inventory will be recognized at NRV. Inventory will be recognized at NRV. That means there's a loss in the value of inventory of 5,000. And it will go in income statement either as a separate line item or by increasing COGS. I hope अभी तक आपको याद हो गया होगा. Moving forward, sir, what if later the NRV rises? What if NRV goes to 52,000? Sir, currently in the books, the inventory is shown at 45, but the value of the same inventory is 52K. That means can we reverse? Yes, we can. But what is the maximum that I can reverse it to? The original cost, which is 50K. That means the maximum reversal that can happen is 5K and not 7K. Because ideally you would see currently it is at 45K, the value of inventory is 95 or 52K, NRV, new NRV is 52K. Ideally the value of inventory should go up by 7,000. Why reversal? I hope you guys understand. I mean the value of inventory is going up. So it should go up by 7,000. But what is the issue? Sir, original cost was 50,000. How can you go beyond that? So the maximum reversal that can happen is 5,000, not 7,000. And this 5,000 will be shown as a gain or reduction in COGS. I hope you guys understand. Right? And that was your treatment of inventory with respect to IFRS. Sir, what if the question asks write down most likely affect COGS or the line items in income statement? I didn't get your question, Tanush. If you could elaborate on that, that'll be great. All right, now let's come to how do you measure inventory in US GAAP? What were we talking about, sir? We were talking about measurement of inventory. We spoke about IFRS already. Now let us talk about US GAAP. How does US GAAP function? Let us start talking about that. All right, let's get started. Now, US GAAP can be tricky, right? You have to be very careful how you measure inventory in US GAAP. First things first, there are different inventory methods that are there. I hope you guys remember there is FIFO, there is LIFO, there is weighted average, and there is retail sales method. Okay. Under US GAAP, inventory measurement will depend upon the method that you are following. Whether you are following LIFO or retail method, or whether you are whether you are following LIFO or retail method, or any method other than LIFO or retail. That means you're talking about FIFO or weighted average. So there are two very simple bifurcations for measurement of inventory. What are the rules? We will discuss. But first understand how do you measure inventory differs in case of method that you differs as per the method that you are following in case of US GAAP. Sir, the first bifurcation is whether you are following LIFO or retail method, and the other bifurcation is whether your basically methods other than LIFO or retail method, which is your FIFO, weighted average, etc., etc. So, sir, for methods other than LIFO or retail method, the measurement rule remains the same as IFRS, which is lower of cost or NRV. So, when you talk about FIFO or weighted average method, in case of US GAAP, the inventory valuation remains the same, lower of cost or NRV. But in case of REFO or retail method, they have complicated things a little for you guys. It is lower of cost or market. Sir, we have been studying so far that it is lower of cost or NRV, but for LIFO or retail method in US GAAP, it is what? Lower of cost or market. Why am I repeating so much, guys? There's also a reason for this. Why am I repeating so much? Because it's a revision so that, when I repeat again and again and again, you guys sort of get an idea of it and you get hold of it, right? The idea is this is a revision. Okay. All right. So LIFO or retail method, I was talking about that. It is lower of cost or market. Sir, we have been doing lower of cost or NRV. We understand that. A lower of cost or market, what is that? We understand cost. Let us understand what do you mean by market? Market means replacement cost. What does market mean? Replacement cost. Sir, fair enough. Replacement cost, what does that mean? First, please explain that to us. Replacement cost is if I were to replace an exact similar asset in the market today, what is the cost that I would incur? What if I were to replace that exact asset? Asset, what do I mean by that? The inventory that I'm talking about, the stock that I'm talking about. If I were to exactly replace that, what is the cost that I would incur today in the market? That is what replacement cost is. So, sir, are you telling us lower of cost or market? And market means replacement cost? Yes. But replacement cost is honestly constrained by something. Sir, बोलना क्या चाह रहे हो? What I'm trying to tell you guys is the replacement cost has a ceiling and has a floor. Meaning replacement cost cannot be more than NRV. And replacement cost cannot be less than NRV minus normal profit margin. सर बहुत कंफ्यूजन हो गया सर, आपने बोला एनआरवी आता ही नहीं है, यहाँ पे एनआरवी कहाँ से आ गया, आप समझ नहीं आ रहा है सर, एनआरवी क्यों लेके आ गए आप यहाँ पे? NRV is just used here. Again, listen to this very carefully. NRV is just used here to calculate the replacement cost, floor and ceiling. Sir, basically, what are you trying to tell us? In case of LIFO retail sales method, in case of US GAAP, NRV is, sorry, inventory is valued at lower of cost or market. Sir, what exactly is market? Sir, market is equal to replacement cost. Market is what? Is equal to replacement cost. But the maximum the replacement cost can be is NRV, and the minimum it can be is NRV minus normal profit margin. Sir, if the replacement cost that we have calculated, that is the cost to replace the good in the market, is more than NRV. So let's say, for example, my NRV is 100, but my replacement cost is 110. So what do I take as replacement cost? The maximum replacement cost can be is equal to NRV. That is, I will have to take NRV as 100, even if I calculated it as, I will have to take market as 100. Sorry, my bad. I will have to take market as 100, even if I calculated market as 110. सर मार्केट मार्केट क्या बोल रहे हो? अरे रिप्लेसमेंट कॉस्ट बोल रहा हूँ, बार बार अलग अलग टर्म्स यूज कर रहा हूँ ताकि कंफ्यूज ना हो आप लोग। आइडियली बार बार अलग अलग टर्म्स यूज करके आप कंफ्यूज ही होंगे, बट वी आर डूइंग रिवीजन राइट नाउ, सो आई होप यू कैन अंडरस्टैंड दिस। So what are you trying to tell us, sir? Market is equal to replacement cost. Replacement cost can be maximum NRV or NRV minus, or it can be minimum. Minimum it can be is NRV minus normal profit margin. तो सर अगर मेरा मार्केट जो मैंने निकाला है, basically replacement cost that I've calculated is 110, but the NRV is 100. So if the NRV is 100 and my replacement cost is 110, what do I take as replacement cost? I will take it as 110. Yes? No, I will take it as 100. Right? ओके, फेयर इनफ। सर ये सब बहुत सारा आपने बहुत सारी चीजें एक साथ बोल दी सर, एक बार प्लीज एक एग्जांपल करते हैं क्या? लेट डू एन एग्जांपल। लेट्स से फॉर एग्जांपल द कॉस्ट ऑफ माय इन्वेंटरी इज 100। ओके, फेयर इनफ। सर एनआरवी ऑफ माय इन्वेंटरी इज 110। ओके, द रिप्लेसमेंट कॉस्ट फॉर माय इन्वेंटरी इज 120। द नॉर्मल प्रॉफिट मार्जिन ऑफ माय इन्वेंटरी इज 5। ओके, the company is following LIFO or retail sales method. Okay, sir, fair enough. All right, getting it. Sir, in retail sales method or LIFO, in case of US GAAP, it is calculated what inventory is calculated at lower of cost or market. And sir, market is equal to replacement cost. Sir, the replacement cost that I've calculated is 120. So I should directly take 120. Array, but hold on. I will have to check for constraints. What constraints? The ceiling constraint and the floor constraint. Okay. Sir, the ceiling constraint is that the replacement cost can maximum be, ceiling means maximum, it can maximum be how much? 110, which is NRV. And what is my NRV? 110. Okay, sir, fair enough. That is what your NRV is, 110. Sir, the minimum that replacement cost can be what, sir? It can be NRV minus normal profit margin. NRV is 110, normal profit margin is 5. So it comes down to what? 105. So, sir, 105 is what is going to be the floor. Where is my replacement cost? 120. Maximum it can be 110. What do I take as replacement cost? 110. So, lower of cost or NRV, sorry, lower of cost or market. A market is equal to replacement cost. My replacement cost is 110. Cost is how much? 100. Market is how much? Is equal to replacement cost, and replacement cost I've just calculated is 110. So, my inventory will be valued at 100. सर इतना माथा पच्ची क्यों किया सर? 100 ही आ रहा था ना, तो क्यों ऐसा फालतू टाइम पास किया? थोड़ा बहुत करना चाहिए ना सर। बट व्हाट इफ my replacement cost was 100? What if my replacement cost was 100? Sir, so replacement cost is equal to 100. So that is what I should take. But hold on, I have to check for the ceiling and floor. Sir, ceiling is 110. Okay, it is within the ceiling limit. But okay, it is lower than the floor. So what do I take? My replacement cost as 105. That will become my market. So 105 and lower of cost of market. What is going to be the value of my inventory? Sir, it is going to be, what? It is going to be 100. Right? So I hope you guys understand this very, very well, right? Sir, what if there is a write down? Sir, what if there is a write down? Sir, meaning actually the market that was calculated was 95 and the cost of my inventory was 100. There's a write down of 5. Okay, sir, there's a write down of 5. That means there's a loss in the value of inventory. Sir, from IFRS, we have been learning that either I recognize that as a separate line item or either I adjust it in COGS. Is it the same in US GAAP? No. In US GAAP, for small changes, you increase the COGS. If there's a write down in value and the value here has been written down, so it is rupees 5, that means there's a loss. How do you recognize this in income statement? If this is a small change, you increase the COGS, and if it is a large change, then you what? You recognize that as a separate line item in the books of accounts, basically income statement. Sir, what is small, what is large? That is something that is subjective. It depends. क्या हमको वो लेवल पे लेके जाएंगे क्या सर? नो, it is not going to happen with you guys. They are not going to ask you that. But the point is that you should know what are small changes and what are large changes. It can be subjective. You don't need to know it exactly, right? That is what it is. Now, sir, if there's a write down, what happens? Sir, my market becomes my new cost. So my market was 95. If there's a write down, so cost of my inventory, sorry, the value of my inventory in the books of accounts is going to be what? 95. Sir, what if there's a reversal in the value tomorrow of inventory? Sir, what if the market goes up? What do we do then? Can we reverse in US GAAP? No, I can't reverse in US GAAP. There is no provision of reversing your reversing your write down in case of US GAAP. It is not allowed in case of US GAAP. And it applies to both, lower of cost or NRV, whatever method you're following. कुछ भी कर लो, यहाँ पे हो या यहाँ पे हो, wherever you are, no reversal. Okay. So that was your valuation of inventory, a very, very important topic, I feel, from a CFA level 1 standpoint. All right. I hope you guys are with me. Yes or no? So far, how's it going? Quickly, quickly, quickly. How has the revision session been so far? Have I been too fast? Have I been too slow? Please quickly give me a feedback so that I can proceed further. Please, बताइए. मला सांगा. तमिल लोको. I think I should stop. But yeah. તમે લોકોને સમજાતું નથી. સમજાતું શું? Anyway, I'll stop. Sorry. Anyway, yeah, I'm trying to learn Gujarati a little. Perfect. So I already have good feedbacks. So that's good. अरे बाकी सारे क्या कर रहे हैं यार? There are 24, 25 people in the chat box and I'm only getting 4 or 5 perfect. Come on, guys, I'm way better than this. I know all 24 should say yes because one, I am the one. But yeah, good. बोलो. समझे छे सर. ओ परिता, you are Gujarati. Okay. Anyway, चलो. बोलो हाँ, परफेक्ट परफेक्ट बोलो फटाफट फटाफट. और अगर परफेक्ट नहीं है तो मत बोलना, निकल जाना. I'm kidding. Anyway, all right, let's get started and let's take an example. Original cost of the asset is 320. The estimated selling price is 340. The estimated selling cost is 25. The NRV is 315. The replacement cost is 300. The normal profit margin is 20. Calculate or value the inventory under IFRS and under US GAAP. Let us quickly do that. Let us quickly do that. In IFRS, how do you value inventory? Sir, कुछ भी हो, it is lower of always cost or NRV. कोई भी मेथड हो, FIFO, LIFO, कुछ भी हो, हमेशा it is lower of cost or NRV. Okay, sir, fair enough. Sir, cost is how much? Sir, it is 320. Sir, how much is NRV? Oh shit, NRV तो दी रही है. कैसे निकाले? Sir, estimated selling price minus estimated selling cost. We know this. We are smart. 340 minus 25. That comes to how much? That comes to 340 minus 25. That comes to 315. So, sir, actually the NRV is lower. What do we do? NRV is lower. What do we do? Sir, we reduce or write down the value of inventory by how much? By 5 rupees. Simple as that. Okay. Sir, what about US GAAP? Sir, it is lower of cost or market. In case of Sir, in case of LIFO or retail sales method, sir, but in case of FIFO or weighted average, sir, the logic remains the same. It is lower or cost of NRV, lower of cost or NRV. So it is going to be the same, no difference. So for FIFO and weighted average, this calculation remains the same under US GAAP. But in case of LIFO or retail sales method, it is going to be lower or cost of market. How much is market? We are not going to cover leases, by the way. Leases is going to happen tomorrow. Okay. Anyway, also I guess, huh. Anyway, so what I was saying is lower of cost on market, and how much is cost? Sir, cost is 320. Sir, how do we calculate market? Sir, market is equal to replacement cost. Sir, market is equal to replacement cost. How much is my replacement cost? 300. Arey, but listen, I have to check for the ceiling and the floor. Sir, how much is the ceiling? Ceiling is equal to NRV. And how much is my NRV? Sir, my NRV is 315. Okay, sir, your NRV is 315. That becomes the ceiling. Okay, fair enough. Sir, the floor is going to be what? It is going to be my NRV minus normal profit margin. NRV is 315 and normal profit margin is 20. 315 minus 20 is going to be how much? It is going to be 305. अरे यार मैंने NRV यहाँ लिखा हुआ है. मैंने आपको फालतू क्वेश्चन पूछ लिया. Anyway, हाँ. So is it within that range? No, sir. It is within the range of the ceiling, but it is lower than the floor. तो क्या करें सर? हमारा फ्लोर बन जाएगा हमारा एनआरवी, हमारा फ्लोर बन जाएगा हमारा रिप्लेसमेंट कॉस्ट. सो दिस बिकम्स माय रिप्लेसमेंट कॉस्ट एंड रिप्लेसमेंट कॉस्ट विल बी इक्वल टू 305 एंड रिप्लेसमेंट कॉस्ट इज इक्वल टू मार्केट. तो मेरा मार्केट कितना हो गया? 305 एंड अल्टीमेटली द लॉस इज गोइंग टू बी हाउ मच? 15. एक मिनट रुक जाओ, 305 आएगा कितना आएगा? मैंने कुछ गलती की है क्या? Oh, sorry, guys. My bad. Sorry, guys. Yeah. What I was saying is, how much is going to be your replacement cost? So replacement cost is the ceiling is 315. So the floor is going to be what? So the floor is going to be NRV minus normal profit margin. NRV is 315. Normal profit margin is 20. तो उसका बाद क्या हो जाएगा? ये 295 हो जाएगा. तो सर, is my replacement cost within the ceiling and the floor? Yes, it is. So my replacement cost will become my market. So that is what it is going to be. And sir, that is what my uh, basically market is going to be. And 20 rupees is going to be my loss. हाँ, 295 समझ गया. Right. So you can clearly see in case of IFRS and US GAAP में भी same रहेगा. कौन से method के लिए? FIFO के लिए और weighted average के लिए. Right. So that will be 315 is the value of the inventory after the write down, and $5 is the loss. And in this case, it is going to be $300. Basically, in case of US gap with respect to LIFO and retail sales, and the loss is going to be 20. Right? That is what it looks like. Okay, sir, हमने example भी कर लिया, समझ में आ गया. Let's move forward and let's talk about what exactly is the impact of write down on financial statement and ratios. Sir, we had in the previous example, we actually our inventory value went down either in IFRS also and US GAAP also. Okay, sir, it went down by 15 or by 20. Sorry, by 5 or by 20. Okay, fair enough. Sir, what is the impact of this on my financial statements, on my ratios? Okay, let's talk about that. What happens immediately? What happens immediately? Remember, in IFRS or in US GAAP, you have an option. In US GAAP, for small changes, you do that. But in IFRS, you have an option to recognize the write down in COGS. So what will happen if an inventory is written down? Assume that in US GAAP, you're doing the same. What will happen, sir? Your COGS will go up, assuming that you're recording that write down in COGS. What will happen as a result of this? What will happen as a result of this? Sir, first things first. First things first. What will happen as a result of this? Sir, my COGS will go up. If my COGS goes up, what happens to my profit? It goes down. So my gross profit margin, my operating profit margin, my net profit margin, everything will go down. Why? Because ultimately gross profit is calculated as sales minus COGS. Operating profit is calculated as whatever my gross profit is minus the expenses that are there. SG&A. And net profit margin is calculated as what? Whatever my remaining EBIT is, which is my operating profit minus the interest and taxes, you get what? Net profit. Ultimately, sir, अगर ऊपर gross profit कम होगा तो सब कुछ ही नीचे कम होगा. right? That is what will happen. And of course, then return on asset and return on equity will also change, because return on equity is net profit divided by your equity, right? And of course, return on assets would also change because ultimately both of them incorporate the net profit, right? That is what it is. Okay, sir, fair enough. What about the balance sheet? This last line that is left. I have not yet discussed that. I will discuss that. Don't worry. All right, sir. What will happen in terms of balance sheet? Sir, if there's a write down, the value of my inventory goes down. If my inventory goes down, current asset goes down. If current asset goes down, total asset goes down. Okay, that is what it is in terms of balance sheet. That assets will go down. Sir, what will happen to equity? Sir, equity will also go down. How come? Sir, because what? Because there's a lower net income. And if net income reduces, retained earning reduces, and if retained earning reduces, what happens ultimately? Your equity goes down. Fair enough. Okay, sir, from a liquidity ratio, which is current ratio, sir, current ratio is current asset divided by current liability. Sir, if my inventory is going down, that means my current asset is going down. And if my current asset is going down, basically my numerator in the current ratio is going down. And if the numerator goes down, what happens to the ratio? It will fall down. Sir, what about the quick ratio? What about the quick ratio? Sir, quick ratio will not be impacted. Why? It is also a liquidity ratio, but it will not be impacted because it doesn't consider inventory at all. It is smart. Inventory नहीं पकड़ता, right? That is what it is. The next is activity ratio. Next is what? Activity ratio. What do you mean by activity ratio? जो टर्नओवर रेशियोज निकालते हैं ना आप, जो हर बार मिस्टेक करते थे क्लास में, याद है कि नहीं? इन्वेंट्री टर्नओवर, ये टर्नओवर, वो टर्नओवर, फिर उसमें ऊपर क्या आएगा, नीचे क्या आएगा, सारी गलती होती थी, राइट? आई होप यू गाइस हैव बीन एबल टू करेक्ट दैट राइट नाउ. I don't know how many of you guys have studied FSA from me here, but yeah. So inventory turnover is calculated as how? Sir, it is calculated as whatever my COGS is divided by average inventory. Okay, sir, my inventory is going down, my COGS is going up as a result of write down. तो ओवरऑल रेशियो में क्या होगा सर? सर, डिनोमिनेटर नीचे जा रहा है, न्यूमरेटर ऊपर जा रहा है, ओवरऑल रेशियो विल गो अप. ओके. Sir, if the ratio is going up, what will happen to days on inventory on hand? Sir, days on inventory on hand is 365 divided by inventory turnover. Sir, it is what? 365 divided by inventory turnover. तो उसको क्या होगा सर? Days on inventory of hands will go down. And if days on inventory in hand goes down, what happens to the cash conversion cycle? It goes down. Because cash conversion cycle, what happens in cash conversion cycle? You add your inventory, number of days of inventory, right? So if that is going down, what will happen? It will ultimately be reduced, right? And total asset turnover will go up. Total asset turnover will go up. Why? Because total asset turnover incorporates sales, and in denominator you have total assets. So if current assets are going down, total assets are going down. If this goes down, what happens? The overall ratio goes up, right? I hope you guys are able to comprehend this. What happens to the leverage ratios? So debt to asset ratio. So debt to asset ratio will go down. Why? Because assets are going up. Sorry, because assets are going down. My bad, my bad. Because assets are going down. That is what will happen, right? So debt to asset ratio, sir, assets are going down. So overall ratio will go up because the denominator is going down. Sir, debt to equity ratio, what will happen to that? Sir, debt divided by equity. Sir, equity is going down because retained earnings are going down, because COGS have gone up and profit has gone down. Ultimately, what will happen to the entire ratio? Sir, it will go up. Right. And ROA and ROE will ultimately reduce. Sir, ROA and ROE will reduce. Okay, but sir, ideally, ROA considers my net income divided by the assets. Sir, ROE is my net income divided by equity. So, sir, my net income is basically going down. Okay, so my numerator is declining. Sir, in both the cases. And my denominator is actually, sir, my denominator, what is happening to that? My denominator is also declining. Okay. Sir, the declining of numerator should mathematically, ideally, what? Reduce my ROE and ROA. But the decline in denominator should mathematically increase my ROA and ROE. सर, ये तो ऑपोजिट इफेक्ट हो गया. तो कैसे डेफिनेटिवली आप बोल सकते हो कि आपका आरओए और आरओई गिरेगा? हाउ कैन यू बी वेरी डेफिनेटिव दैट योर आरओए एंड आरओई विल फॉल डाउन? Oh, because of the impact that both of them create. Basically, percentage decrease in net income will be more than percentage decrease in assets and equity. मतलब ये ज्यादा गिर रहा है, और मतलब सॉरी, यहां पे करना चाहिए था. क्या हो रहा है? ये ज्यादा गिर रहा है. दिस इज फॉलिंग मोर. Then what? This is falling. Basically, denominator is falling lower than how much numerator is falling. And ultimately, if numerator is falling more than the denominator, the effect of numerator is going to supersede the effect of denominator. And ultimately, what will happen? ultimately your ratio will decline because numerator is falling by a lot more. So I hope you guys have been able to comprehend this very, very well. Sir, what happens in subsequent periods? Sir, in subsequent periods, okay, what will happen? In subsequent period, your inventory will have a lower carrying value. Okay, sir, my inventory will have a lower carrying value. Why are you saying that? Are remember you had written down your inventory, so inventory value is reduced. Okay, so sir, COGS is equal to opening stock plus purchases minus closing stock. Okay, in current period, which is what I'm talking about, basically subsequent period, the opening stock will be the closing stock of the previous period, and the closing stock is inventory, and inventory has gone down in value. So opening stock will also reduce in value, and if opening stock reduces in value, it has been added to COGS. What happens, sir? Overall COGS goes down. Unfortunately, I'm not giving a lot of mathematical example. मैं बहुत ऊपर नीचे कर रहा हूँ, but I hope you guys are able to understand this, right? तो ओपनिंग स्टॉक क्या हो जाएगा आपका? नीचे चले जाएगा. तो इससे क्या हो जाएगा? आपका सीओजीएस भी फॉलो होगा क्योंकि सीओजीएस में आप ओपनिंग स्टॉक ऐड करते हैं, राइट? So what happens as a result? Your COGS falls down, and ultimately, if COGS falls down, your profitability goes up. And if your profitability goes up, what happens? Your equity will go up. Your equity will go up, right? Why? Because your retained earnings are going up because your profitability is increasing. And if your equity is going up because your profitability is increasing, ultimately what happens in return on asset and in return on equity, in numerator, you take your net profit, and your net profit ultimately, if it is going up because of lower COGS, will increase your ROA and ROE. Guys, I hope you understand in denominator of ROA and ROE, equity and assets, there is not going to be a massive impact, right? And that's what happens in subsequent periods. And I hope you guys understand the valuation methods of inventory affect your COGS, affect your ending value of the inventory. I hope you guys understand this profitability, the kind of taxes that you pay, the financial ratios that you have, that I have just explained all of these ratios and stuff, right? That is what it is. Also, there is nothing like, I hope you guys understand this. Whenever you're valuing inventory, you're trying to put the value to them. You're not like when you're doing FIFO and LIFO as a method of valuation of inventory, you're not literally, segregating goods in your godown. कि ये पहले आया था बाद में आया था. No, you don't do any of that. You just allocate cost to it. कि ठीक है हम लोग पहले ऐसे बेचेंगे और फिर एलोकेट कर देंगे कॉस्ट. लिटरली हम लोग ये नहीं करेंगे कि जो पहले आया उसको लिटरली पहले बेचेंगे. नो, दैट इज नॉट व्हाट इज गोइंग टू हैपन. The thing that came first, you're literally selling first because you're following FIFO. Arey, no, just a way of assigning the cost. That doesn't happen literally. I've seen a lot of students being confused about it. All right. Again, not very relevant from an exam standpoint, but yeah. Okay, sir, fair enough. We do get it. Let's move forward. All right, let's move forward. Sir, what if there is inflation? Inflation means rising prices. What if there is rising prices? Rising prices of what? Sir, ideally, whatever we are purchasing, because we are a seller. So let's say, for example, I'm not a manufacturing setup, I'm a trader. So for me, whatever I purchase, uh, and the price of that is going up, that is what inflation is. And whatever I purchase is inventory, it is going to be in my stock. Okay, sir, what are you trying to? Please give us a context. We are talking about inflation. Inflation means what? The prices are rising. Now you are somebody who's a trader. What do? You purchase inventory. Now the value, whatever you make, whatever purchases you make, the cost of that is going up. That is what inflation is. सर बाद में आगे तो सेलिंग सेलिंग प्राइस भी ज्यादा मिल रहा है ना, उसका क्या? होल्ड ऑन. व्हाट आई एम ट्राइंग टू टेल यू गाइस इज राइट नाउ जस्ट फ्रॉम द कॉन्टेक्स्ट ऑफ परचेजेस. सो व्हाट आर वी ट्राइंग टू टॉक अबाउट? वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इन्फ्लेशनरी पीरियड्स, बेसिकली प्राइस राइजिंग. ओके, but the quantity of inventory that you have is either stable or either increasing. Basically, the inventory or stock you have over the years, over year one, over year two, over year three, the quantity of inventory is either stable. So it is either 400, 400, 400, 400, or either it is increasing. It is not reducing. Because if it reduces, some other effect happens. And we will talk about that later in the concept of LIFO liquidation. Right now, only understand two things. Very important assumption to understand this concept. What is that assumption? So first assumption that the prices are rising, and the other assumption is that your quantities are either stable or either increasing. Please, 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 इस बात की गांठ बांध लो. Very important. All right, sir, fine enough. That's how it is. We get it. Let's move forward. Sir, if there's an inventory that I have and the prices are rising and there's basically inflation and quantities are either stable or increasing, sir, what happens in case of FIFO? What happens in case of LIFO? Let us explore. What happens in case of LIFO? What happens in case of FIFO? Let us explore. Your cost of goods sold will always be lower in case of FIFO as compared to LIFO. Why? Because in case of inflation, what happens? The prices are rising, and whatever are the more expensive units which are recently purchased than as compared to the older units will form a part of COGS in case of LIFO. But in case of FIFO, the older units will first form a part of your, which are purchased at a cheaper rate, will first form a part of your COGS because that's those are the ones that are going to be sold. सर ये सब क्या बोल रहे हो सर समझ नहीं आ रहा है कि एग्जांपल ले क्या यस लेट अस क्विकली टेक एन एग्जांपल लेट अस क्विकली टेक एन एग्जांपल let's say for example okay I talk about year 1 year 2 year 3 okay in year 1 opening stock I have started my business opening stock is going to be zero okay sir the purchases that I made are 10,000 units okay the closing stock that I have is 2,000 units okay sir what is the quantity that I must have sold obviously 8,000 this closing stock will become the opening stock of next year how much have I purchased sir I have purchased 12,000 sir, what is the closing stock now? Sir, the closing stock is 4,000. That means how much have I sold? 10,000. Okay. Sir, whatever is the closing stock of this year will become the opening stock of next year. Okay, fair enough. Sir, the purchases that I have made is let's say again 8,000. Okay, what I end up selling is, let's say for example, 10,000. Sorry. What I end up selling is let's say for example 10,000. उल्टा कर रहा हूँ इस बार मैं. Okay, so what should be the closing stocks at 2,000? We'll only talk about first 3 years. Okay. Let's say the selling price in the first year is 100, in the second year is 105, 110. And the cost price, of course, sir, there is inflation, so cost price will also rise. It is 80, 85, and 90. Simple. Okay, sir, fair enough. All right. What all are we supposed to calculate? Whenever I'm comparing what inflation and I'm comparing what LIFO and FIFO, what is my second assumption? That the quantities of inventory are either stable or increasing. And you can clearly see, sorry, hold on. यहाँ पे हमने purchases थोड़ा कम ले लिया हमको थोड़ा ज़्यादा लेना चाहिए था my bad we should have taken let's say 14,000 and I'm saying just let's say 6,000 is what is there so this will come down to 18 and 6 so this will come down to 12,000 all right so now you can clearly see the value of inventory sorry the amount of inventory is increasing right. That is what the second assumption was. That is also satisfied. And inflation is there. That is also satisfied. See, 100, 105, 110, 80, 85, 90. Let us compare LIFO and FIFO from different aspects. What? Let us compare LIFO and FIFO from different aspects. Let's get started. Sir, what are the different aspects that we are supposed to compare it with? Sir, first is COGS. What is the value of closing stock? What is the gross profit? What is the taxes that I pay? What is ultimately the net income that I have? Okay, fair enough. Let us quickly get started. All right. Let's first take an example where I'm following FOT, I'm following FIFO. Sir, whenever I'm following FIFO, and actually LIFO भी हम साथ ही साथ कर लेते so that it is easier. Sir, what is the revenue that I have in the year 1, year 2, year 3, year 1, year 2, year 3? सर LIFO FIFO दोनों में ही रेवेन्यू तो सेम ही होगा ना सर रेवेन्यू क्यों चेंज होगा थोड़ा सा प्रेजेंटेशन बेटर कर लेते हैं ऑलराइट again sorry guys handwriting uh yeah so what I was trying to tell you guys is that let's say for example uh the revenue would ultimately, no, sorry, I lost the link. The revenue would ultimately remain the same, right? So if you're selling 8,000 in the first year, 10,000 in the second year, and 12,000 in the third year, so revenue is going to remain the same. It is not going to change at all. Same year, 8K, 10K, 12K. Okay. into what is the selling price for first year, sir? It is 100, then it is 105, then it is 110, it is 100, 105, 110. So, sir, my revenue should remain the same, either it is FIFO or LIFO. Right, sir, fair enough. It should remain the same. What should the amount be? Let us quickly calculate that. So, I'm going to calculate that right now. So 80,000 into 100 is going to be, sorry, 8,000 into 100 is going to be 8 lakhs. That's simple. So it is going to be 8 lakhs. This is going to be how much? 10,000 into 105. That comes to 10.5 lakhs. And the last one is 12,000 into 110. So that comes to 13 lakh 20,000. Sir, the revenue here will also remain the same. It will not change. Okay. One thing that will change is COGS for sure. Okay, sir. But the first year, sir, there is no opening stock. So, sir, COGS क्या change होगा? नहीं. COGS will remain the same because everything that you sell in the first year will be from purchases. I hope you guys understand this. Either in FIFO, either in LIFO, everything that you sell in the first year will be completely from purchases because there is no opening stock. So what will happen to COGS? Sir, it will be the same in both the cases. How much have I purchased? 10,000. What is my closing stock? 8,000. What is the quantity that I've sold? 8,000. So quantity that I've sold 8,000 will completely be from the purchases that I've made for that year. And I have purchased from that year, I have purchased that those year goods at 80 rupees. तो सर पूरा का पूरा जो 8,000 मैंने बेचा है that comes from what? That comes from the purchases of this year. 6.4 lakhs is what it comes down to. So COGS दोनों ही केस में सेम होगा. And what does your profit come down to? Sir, your profit comes down to 1.6 lakh, 1.6 lakh in both the cases. Sir, what kind of profit are we talking about? Gross profit. Okay, sir, fair enough. That is what it would be. Sir, in second year, now the game changes. Sir, in second year, how do you calculate COGS? In second year, how do you calculate COGS? In second year, how much have I sold? Sir, I have sold how much? In second year, in case of second year, how much have I sold? Sir, I have sold 10,000. All right, you've sold 10,000 in second year. If I'm following, okay, if I'm following LIFO, sir, if you're following LIFO, the 10,000 should come from what? Completely from this year's purchases, that is 12,000 that I've purchased this year at 85 rupees. Okay, so that is pretty simple to find out the COGS in case of LIFO. Yes, all I have to do is simply take 10,000 and then multiply it by 85. I get 8.5 lakhs. So what is my gross profit in that case? Sir, it is going to be 2 lakhs. Sir, but in case of FIFO, that is where the complication kicks in. I have sold how much? I have sold 10K. Remember, I had opening stock. I will have to sell that first because of FIFO as a method. तो सर पूरा का पूरा 2000 मैं पहले बेचूंगा एट व्हाट रेट एट 80 रुपीज बिकॉज इट इज एन ओपनिंग स्टॉक सो 2 into what 80 2000 into 80 that comes to what that comes to 1,60,000 and sir the remaining 8k will come from this year's purchases which is what which is 12,000 purchased at 85 so sir 8,000 into 85 that comes to what that comes to 6.8 lakhs. So totally, my COGS will be 1.6 plus 6.8. That comes to 8.4 lakhs. That comes to 8.4 lakhs in case of FIFO. And you can clearly see in case of FIFO, the COGS is lower. Why? Because your COGS consists of units that belong to previous year that were priced at a lower rate of 80. तो आपका प्रॉफिट कितना हो जाएगा इन दिस केस सर इट विल बी 2.1 लाख विच वॉट प्रॉफिट ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट exactly like that third year would happen in third year how much you are selling sir in third year sir I have how much sir I have purchased 14,000 I have 4,000 in opening stock I am selling 12,000 that entire 12,000 will belong to where sir will belong to purchases of this year at the rate of 90 so 12,000 into 90 that comes down to how much that comes down to 10.8 lakhs so that is 13.2 minus 10.8 that comes to 2.4 lakhs that is going to be my gross profit. But in case of FIFO, what will happen? You will first sell whatever has been purchased in the previous year. You have sold 12K this year. Your opening stock was how much? 4K. This will belong to the previous year purchases. 4K into 85, that is what it would look like. So 4 into 85, that will come to 3,40,000. So 3.4 lakhs. And the rest of the 8K will come from where? It will come from this year's purchases. So 8,000 into 90, that will be 7,20,000. And 7.2 plus 3.4, your total COGS comes to 10.6, which is clearly lower than what is there in LIFO. And 13.2 minus 10.6, that comes to what? 2.6 lakhs. You can clearly see the gross profit in case of FIFO is way more than profit in case of LIFO. Sir, why is this the case? Because in LIFO, the COGS consists of the most recent purchases which are priced in case of inflation environment at a more rate, at a higher rate. But in case of FIFO, sir, COGS consists of the previous year purchases and the current year purchases. The previous year purchases, sir, were purchased at a lower rate. So if I purchase at a lower rate, what happens? So my COGS goes down. If my COGS goes down as compared to LIFO, what happens? My gross profit comes up. And that is how the whole thing would function. All right. So we can comprehend the whole thing. Sir, the COGS in case of FIFO will be lower. Why? Because it consists of older, cheaper units that were priced at a lower rate. But in case of LIFO, it will consist of recent purchases and that is priced at a more expensive rate. Ending inventory in case of FIFO is going to be what, sir? It is going to be higher. Why? Because you can clearly see in case of FIFO, what will happen? Sir, we have just used up all the opening stock. Whatever the closing stock is comprises of current year purchases. They are priced at a higher rate. But in case of LIFO, first we'll sell all the recent year purchases, then we'll go to the previous year purchases. So in case of LIFO, sir, the previous year these purchases still remain. That's why the inventory ultimately will be lower. Sir, एक बार please बता दो ना एक साल का. Let's quickly take an example. We'll continue from this example only, right? How do you value the closing stock? Let's say, for example, we are trying to value the closing stock in case of FIFO for year number 2. In case of FIFO for year number 2, what is the inventory that you have? If I write, I forgot, in case of Word, if you write outside the margins, it will take that as a normal text. Yeah. So in case of FIFO, how do you find out the closing stock? So in case of second year. So in case of second year, if I have to find out the closing stock, what is the closing stock that is there in terms of quantity? Sir, it is 4,000. And this 4,000 will completely belong to the purchases of this year, which is priced at 80. So 4K into 85, which is priced at 85, 4K into 85. And in case of LIFO, sir, how do I find out the value of inventory? In case of LIFO, sir, it is going to be pretty simple. Sir, the entire 4,000 that I have, belongs to what? Belongs to what? Sir, this 4,000 will in part belong to what? Some part will belong to opening stock, some part will belong to closing stock. Sir, how are we doing that? What was the purchases that I made this year? 12. Opening stock, 2,000. All right, sir, fair enough. Quantity sold, 10,000. Okay, sir, that means, sir, opening stock is completely gone. Uh, and sir, some bit of purchases is going to be left. Sir, so 4,000 should come from where? Should come from this year's purchases. Yes, right? Am I right, guys? सही बोल रहा हूँ ना मैं? अरे यार, सॉरी. ऑल्सो वन थिंग, आई हैव अ हैबिट ऑफ टीचिंग नॉर्मली, तो मैं गलत बोलता हूँ ताकि तुम लोग करेक्ट कर पाओ. बट द पॉइंट इज यहाँ पे बहुत लैग के बाद आप लोग मेरे को करेक्ट कर पाओगे तो टाइम वेस्ट होगा. एनीवे, चलो ठीक है. I'll quickly repeat myself. What is going to happen in LIFO? What is going to happen in LIFO, guys? Sir, in case of LIFO, what do I have as closing stock? Sir, I have 4,000 as closing stock. Sir, in case of LIFO, the first priority is going to be the purchases of this year. Okay, so 10,000 that has been sold this year is going to be completely out of the purchases of this year. That means 2,000 will be left from the purchases of this year and 2,000 is already left from the purchases of previous year. So 2,000 into 80 plus 2,000 into 85, that will be the value of the inventory. Right? And ultimately, sir, this will be lower than this because your entire 4K is multiplied by 85, your 2K is multiplied by 80, and 2K is multiplied by 85. All right. And that's how the whole thing would function in terms of inventory. And of course, sir, gross profit is higher in case of FIFO because why? Because your COGS is lower. And in LIFO, it is lower because your COGS is higher. And taxes, obviously, if gross profit is lower, what happens to taxes? Sir, taxes will be reduced. But in case of FIFO, because your gross profit is high, taxes will obviously be high. राइट. एंड ऑफ कोर्स ये थोड़ा सा ऊपर आना चाहिए था नेट इनकम, और टैक्सेस बाद में आना चाहिए था. ऑफ कोर्स इफ ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट इज हायर द नेट इनकम विल बी हायर, इफ ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट इज लोअर द नेट इनकम विल बी लोअर. Right, and ultimately this has been summarized by this particular table. Sir, what about deflationary period? Everything reverses, everything flips. In case of deflationary period, obviously, sir, in case of deflationary period, when the prices are going down, okay, sir, LIFO has the most recent purchase units. In case of what? In case of its COGS, but FIFO will have the older units and the recent purchase units. So in case of FIFO, sir, the COGS will be higher. Why? Because it has older purchase units which are expensive than the recent units. Why? Because it is a deflationary environment. And the assumption still again remains that the prices are either are either falling or they are stable. I mean, the quantities are stable or increasing. All right. So the assumption is what in case of deflationary period, it remains the same. Of course, so the quantities are going to be stable or increasing, and your prices are falling. That's very important. So in case of COGS, what happens? So in case of COGS, whatever is going to be sold is going to be from previous year's inventory. I mean, okay, so they are priced way more than this year's inventory because it's a deflationary environment and COGS will be more. But in case of LIFO, sir, what will happen? Sir, the inventory is going to consist of more recent year purchases which are priced at a lower rate as opposed to previous year. That makes it that makes the COGS lower. Okay, and ending inventory, of course, here will be lower and here will be higher. Why? Because this will consist of previous year's purchases. This will consist of recent purchases priced at a lower rate, priced at a higher rate. Just hold on for a second, guys. Let me get the charger. All right. So I hope you guys have understood this as well. In case of gross profit, what happens, sir? If COGS is higher, gross profit will be lower. If gross profit is lower, net income will be lower, and ultimately taxes will be lower. Sir, if the gross profit is what lower, what will happen to the gross profit? If COGS is lower, what will happen to the gross profit, sir? It will be higher. Net profit will be higher, and the taxable income will ultimately be higher as well. All right, sir. We do get that as well. Okay. Just hold on for a second. Let me get the charges for my phone as well. I sort of forgot that. All right. So I hope everyone is with me so far and everyone is understanding everything. Come on, guys, a quick heads up. Yes or no? All right. Thank you so much, guys. Uh, I hope you guys are understanding everything. And yeah, it is actually an effective revision for you guys. That is what the ultimate aim is. So yeah, let's go forward. Let's talk about average cost. Average cost method. How exactly does an average cost work? Sir, average cost is basically whatever your inventory is, you try to price that at an average purchase price. Okay, fair enough. So sir, it should produce the results of COGS and ending inventory somewhere between LIFO and FIFO. Right. So, okay, so the prices are smooth. Simple as that, right? Okay, sir, profitability impact from an inventory valuation perspective. Sir, we have done this completely. Under inflation, LIFO will have a lower gross profit and ultimately lower net profit and ultimately lower net profit and gross profit margin. In case of deflation, sir, FIFO will have a higher gross profit. Sorry. In case of deflation, Sir, FIFO will have a lower gross profit, hence lower net profit, and ultimately lower net profit margin and gross profit margin. Right. That is what this would be. So this is what they're talking about. Of course, you have to understand this fact. What? Uh, that the prices are ultimately, sorry, the quantities are stable or increasing, right? Because if that is not the case, what happens? I will explain to you guys. Right. So, sir, FIFO gives me the best approximation of inventory. Why? Because FIFO consists of the most recent purchases and inventory, and I can tell you that my inventory is more appropriately valued as per the recent trends in case of FIFO. Why? Because it consists of the goods that have been most recently purchased. So they will be shown at most recent purchase prices. And in case of LIFO, you get the most appropriate COGS. Why? Because it consists of goods that have been most recently purchased, hence at the most recently purchased priced, and then ultimately valuing your COGS appropriately. Right. And sir, if the prices are stable, meaning my purchase price, my selling price, everything is stable. It was not 100, 105, 110. It would have been 100, 100, 100. It was not 80, 85, 90. It would have been 80, 80, 80. Then in that case, either LIFO, either FIFO, either weighted average or average, all three of them would have given the same return. So what do you mean by return? Net profit margin and gross profit margin, right? Everything would have been the same, no difference. Right? That is what it would be. So in terms of, the basic discussion about how inventory valuation works and how exactly the impact in case of deflation and inflation, I hope you guys have understood this, and that this is I think the most difficult bit of inventory, where a lot of students face an issue कि यार सर ये कैसे करना है क्या करना है सर समझ नहीं आ रहा सर इन्फ्लेशन डिफ्लेशन क्या बोलना चाह रहे हैं. It's very important that you understand the assumption. Remember, this assumption that I've written down here is very important. This, what's it? This assumption. Because if this doesn't assumption doesn't work, then whatever we have been trying to prove, basically about COGS and everything else will not hold. Sir, what if this assumption is not the is not in place? Basically, my quantities are declining. What quantities? Inventory quantities. Then what happens? Let us understand that concept right now. This concept that I'm going to explain to you guys is called as LIFO liquidation. Okay, sir. So far, in case of inflation, understand LIFO liquidation is only about inflation. What? LIFO liquidation, guys, is only and only about inflation. ये याद रखना. Deflation, विफ्लेशन मत घुसाना इसमें. Very important. All right. So LIFO liquidation is purely about inflation. Understand this. Okay, sir. Fair enough. All right. Sir, we have understood this that in case of inflation, if the quantities of inventory is stable or it is rising, always LIFO will have what? A higher COGS and FIFO will have a lower COGS. This is what we have been proving so far, right? But if the quantity of inventory is not stable, in fact, it is falling, then this might not hold true. कैसे इसको सोचना है बता रहा हूं आप लोगों को. How are you supposed to think in terms of LIFO liquidation is what I'm trying to explain to you guys right now. Sir, कैसे सोचेंगे sir? In case of LIFO liquidation, we have to understand this one thing that we are talking about inflation. Sir, we are talking about inflation. Okay, sir, there was another assumption that was there that the quantity has to be stable or increasing. Here we have changed that assumption. Sir, the quantity is actually declining. Sir, what quantity? Closing stock. Okay. So, sir, in case of inflation, when the prices are rising and the quantity is stable or increasing, we have understood this that in case of LIFO, COGS will be higher, and in case of FIFO, COGS will be lower. Then ultimately impacting gross profit, net profit, all of those things. Sir, we have understood that. In case of LIFO liquidation, the inflation is there, of course, but the quantity of inventory is not stable or not increasing. It is actually falling down. Okay, sir. Again, fair enough. All right. Then how do we move about things now? What do we do? Sir, can we discuss this numerically? Let's get started. Let's take an example of this particular company called as Orion Retail. right? They have begun operations in year number one, right? They sold 8,000 in year one, 10,000 in year two, and 13,000 in year three. Of course, they started business in year one, so opening stock is going to be zero. Okay, sir, purchases in that year were 12,000. So if I've purchased 12,000 and I have sold 8,000, what is going to be the value of my inventory? Of course, sir, 4,000. And then ultimately unit sold is going to be 8,000. Again, वो repeat कर दिया, वापस मैंने बना दिया हूँ. ठीक है? All right. Sir, purchases in second year is how much? Sir, 12,000. Arey, but sir, there was opening stock now. How much? 4,000. Because last year, sir, 4,000 was unsold, so that becomes opening stock of the next year. Okay, sir, purchases I have made of 12,000. Okay, how much have I sold, sir? I have sold 10,000. So out of 16,000 that I had, which was available for sale, because 12K I have purchased and 4K is what I had as opening stock, ultimately, what do I have in terms of closing stock? Sir, 16 is what you have available for sale. Sir, 10 is what you are selling. So 6K will be what? Your ending inventory. So this ending inventory will become the opening stock the next year. What? This ending inventory will become what? Opening stock next year. तो ये रहा आपका opening stock. तो सर ये हो गया आपका opening stock and purchases will be how much? 8,000 for that year. How much have you sold that year? Sir, you have sold 13,000 that year. Okay. That means whatever is left over is what? 1,000. All right, fair enough. We do get it said that 1,000 is left over. So units sold are how much? Ultimately 13,000. उल्टा करके वापस एक बार कैलकुलेट करके बता दिया ताकि आप लोगों को प्रॉब्लम ना हो. You sort of can do every permutation combination of how to calculate, either opening stock, closing stock, and the unit sold. All right, sir, we do understand this. And sir, there is inflation. In what way? You can clearly see the selling price per unit is rising 50 to 53 to 56, 35 to 38 to 31. Purchase cost is also rising. But the only difference here, as the example that I took, what was the example that I took? So this was the example that I took. And here the closing stock was increasing. The ending inventory was increasing. It was stable or increasing, and it was actually increasing. That is what our assumption was. It was 2 to 4 and 4 to 6. But in this case, sir, the ending inventory is in the third year actually falling down. In the third year, it is actually falling down. I'm trying to make you guys understand the differences. Okay, sir, let us do LIFO and FIFO calculations quickly. In case of FIFO and LIFO, what will happen in first year? Sir, in first year, LIFO and FIFO calculation will remain the same. How much have I sold? In first year, 8,000 is what I've sold at the rate of 50 because that is what the selling price was. 4 lakh is what my revenue would be. 35 is what my purchase cost would be because that is what I have. I don't have any opening stock. 8,000 is what I've sold completely from purchases, whether it is FIFO or LIFO. 2 lakh 80,000 will be my COGS. Ultimately, my gross profit comes to 1 lakh 20,000. And the LIFO calculation remains the same for first year, whereby my COGS will be 280, gross profit will be 120, right? That is what it would be. So, okay, sir, fair enough. And like ending inventory also, ये मैंने miss कर दिया, will be 1,40,000. Everything remains the same. Okay, sir, fair enough. What happens in second year? Sir, in second year, sir, older inventory will be sold first. How much have I sold in the second year, sir? We are talking about FIFO right now. What are we talking about FIFO, sir? How much have I sold in the second year, sir? I have sold in the second year 10,000. Sir, how do I break down this 10,000? Sir, 10,000 will come, sir, 4,000 from previous year and sir, 6,000 from what? Sir, current year purchases. Sir, current year purchases are made at 38 and previous year purchases are made at 35. So I can calculate my COGS pretty easily, right? And my selling price is pretty simple. My revenue is pretty sorted. My revenue is going to be what? 10,000 is what I've sold at 53. Feel like 5 lakh 30,000. My COGS will be 4 lakh 4,000 at 35 and 6,000 at 38. We have discussed this 3 lakh 68,000. My gross profit is 1 lakh 62,000, which is revenue minus COGS. And ultimately, my ending inventory will be how much? Sir, entire ending inventory will come from what? From the recent year purchases. Because what I've purchased this year is 12,000. 6,000 has been sold. 6,000 remains in my inventory. And I've purchased that at 38. So that is what my inventory value would be. But in case of LIFO, sir, it would differ. In case of LIFO, what will happen? Sir, I have sold 10,000 and that entire 10,000 will come from the most recent purchases, that is 12,000 into 38. That makes it 38,000, 3,80,000. That makes it what? 3,80,000. Okay, sir, COGS is 3,80,000. Sir, naturally, COGS here again is more. Uh, okay, sir, COGS is more, but LIFO liquidation teaches us something else. What that would teach and how it would be, I will discuss that, don't worry. But right now, definitely my COGS has gone up, and ultimately what happens? So my revenue remains the same by like 30,000. My gross profit will be 530 minus 380, 1,50,000. Here my gross profit is 1,50,000, and in year two you can clearly see my gross profit is 1,62,000. In case of FIFO. In case of FIFO, it is 1 lakh 62, and in case of LIFO, it is 1 lakh 50. ओके सर, फेयर इनफ। तो एक्चुअली तो आपका ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट ऊपर गया ना, तो सर सेम ही तो चीज़ रहा। आई विल talk to you guys about that again. I have repeated that again for you guys. All right. Okay, sir, fair enough. Moving forward, if I were talking about year three, sir, year three में I have sold how much? I have sold 13,000, and entire 13,000 comes from where? In case of FIFO, what will happen? In case of FIFO, what will happen? सर पहले तो मैं 6,000 प्रीवियस ईयर से बेचूंगा एट द रेट ऑफ 38, and the remaining what? And the remaining 4 plus 3, that is 7,000, will come from where? Actually, not 7, 8,000. My bad. कितना बेचा है मैंने? Yeah. So, sir, 6,000 will come from 38 and 7,000 will come from 41 in case of what? In case of FIFO. And ultimately, sir, my COGS will be at 2,28,000 plus 2,87, will be at 5,15,000 basically. All right, sir, my revenue remains the same, which will be 13,000 into 56. Ultimately, my gross profit comes to 2,13,000. And my ending inventory will be 1,000. That will come from the most recent purchases of 41, which is 41,000. Okay, sir, fair enough. In case of LIFO, what will happen in the year three? Sir, in year three, I have sold how much? 13K. Sir, entire 13K should come from the most recent purchases. Sir, but in this year, how much have I purchased? In this year, I have purchased only 8,000. So, sir, the 8,000 should come from what? Sorry. The 8,000 should come from where, sir? 8,000 should come from the most recent purchases at the rate of 41. Okay, fair enough. Uh, Sir, but what about the rest of the quantity? Okay, sir, the rest of the quantity meaning, sir, 8,000 has come. What about the rest of the 5,000? The rest of the 5,000 will come from the older inventory. Which one? The previous year. Okay, sir, in previous year I had 2K left at the at the rate of 38, and from previous year, which is first year, I have 3K that is left at the rate of 35. Is that what my COGS would be? Yes. And that makes my COGS at 5,09,000, which is lower than the COGS of FIFO. FIFO का COGS कितना था? 5,15,000. इसका कितना है? 5,09,000. सर ओके, फेयर इनफ। तो सर एक बार कॉन्टेक्स्ट दे दो ना, इसका समझ नहीं आया। लेट अस स्टार्ट टू डिस्कस द कॉन्टेक्स्ट। Guys, earlier what used to happen when my inventory levels were increasing or were stable, in case of LIFO what used to happen, sir, जो भी मेरा COGS था वो most recent purchases से आ जाता था। क्यों? Because my inventory was increasing. सर क्या बोला, समझा नहीं। Carefully see what is the reason for the rise in inventory. Sorry. Carefully see what is the reason for the rise in inventory. Sir, my purchases have consistently gone up. मेरा purchases कहाँ से कहाँ गया सर? मेरा purchases went from 10,000 to 12,000 to 14,000. The purchases have consistently gone up. That makes my inventory also go up. Okay, sir, the purchases have gone up. That makes your inventory go up. Fair enough. We do get that. All right. So, sir, what was happening in LIFO? Because you had made more purchases, whatever you were selling was completely coming out of the most recent purchases. Listen to this very carefully. Whatever you were selling was coming out of the most recent purchases, as you can clearly see in case of LIFO. That made your COGS go up. सर, हम जो भी परचेस कर रहे थे वो मोस्ट रीसेंट परचेजेस से आ रहा था, क्योंकि मैं बहुत सारा परचेस कर रहा था। मैं परचेजेस कंसिस्टेंटली वेंट अप. So whatever my purchases consistently, because it went up, my COGS that was there consisted of most recent purchases, making my COGS most expensive or more expensive. Okay, sir, your COGS became more expensive. More expensive in what terms? In terms of FIFO. क्योंकि FIFO में से जो बिकेगा वो पहले का बिकेगा। तो पहले तो सस्ता था, अब महंगा है। तो जो थोड़ा आपका COGS का थोड़ा परसेंटेज कहाँ से आ रहा था? जो भी पहले बिक रहा था उससे आ रहा था, और जो बाकी का परसेंटेज आ रहा था वो कहाँ से आ रहा था? वो आ रहा था मोस्ट रिसेंट परचेजेस से। बट इन केस ऑफ LIFO कंप्लीटली इट वाज कमिंग फ्रॉम मोस्ट रिसेंट परचेजेस, बिकॉज परचेजेस केप्ट ऑन गोइंग अप. And because of that, योर LIFO COGS was more in the year 3. बट यहाँ पे क्या बदल गया? यहाँ पे समथिंग चेंज्ड सर. योर परचेजेस डिड नॉट गो अप. योर परचेजेस एक्चुअली वेंट डाउन. एंड आई होप यू गैस अंडरस्टैंड. परचेजेस विल हैव एन इम्पैक्ट ऑन इन्वेंट्री. इसलिए मैं बोलता था आपका इन्वेंट्री इज इधर स्टेबल और इंक्रीजिंग, और यहाँ पे वो assumption मैंने हटा दिया दैट द इन्वेंट्री इज नॉट स्टेबल और इंक्रीजिंग. बाय इन्वेंट्री मीनिंग, बाय इन्वेंट्री नॉट बीइंग स्टेबल और इंक्रीजिंग, दैट मीन योर परचेजेस हैव गॉन डाउन. और जैसे ही आपको दिखा आपका परचेजेस कम हो गया, योर परचेजेस हैव गॉन डाउन विच इज 8,000. आपने कितना बेचा उस साल? 13,000. दैट मीन्स अप अंटिल नाउ व्हाट वाज हैपनिंग इन केस ऑफ लीफो सर, जो भी परचेजेस थे वो कहाँ से आते थे? मोस्ट रीसेंट, सॉरी, जो भी आप सेल कर रहे थे वो कहाँ से आते थे? मोस्ट रीसेंट परचेजेस से आते थे. Whatever you're selling was coming from what? From was coming from the most recent purchases, वहां से आता था. But in this year what will happen sir? Because आपका purchases कम हो गया, आपको क्या करना पड़ा? आपका पुराना inventory utilize करना पड़ा. And you can clearly see in case of COGS you are utilizing your older inventory. कहाँ गया? ये रहा. Carefully see guys, आपने पुरानी इन्वेंट्री भी यूटिलाइज की है. सर वो तो हम लोग इसमें भी करते हैं, फीफो में भी करते हैं. बट फीफो में आप प्रीवियस ईयर की इन्वेंट्री ही यूटिलाइज करते हो. सी, you have utilized the previous year's inventory. But in LIFO, you have not only utilized the previous year's inventory, but you have also utilized the previous year inventory as well. That makes your COGS cheaper in case of LIFO, as clearly seen. And ultimately, in third year, if the COGS is lower, your gross profit will be more, unlike what we have been studying so far. And if the profit is more, your gross profit margin goes up because of liquidation. Why is it called as liquidation? Why is the method called as liquidation? Because your purchases have gone down. And because of that, what happens? The liquidating effect comes. Sir, what do you mean by liquidating effect? Liquidating effect stems from what? Liquidating effect stems from what? The fact that your purchases are going down, they are liquidating, they are reducing. And that is the entire concept of LIFO liquidation. That ideally in the third year we have been studying so far that in an increasing price environment and what, and your inventory being stable or increasing, what happens sir? Every year as we go ahead, LIFO COGS is lower and ultimately LIFO gross profit is lower. But here in case of increasing prices but inventory being either reducing, not either, actually reducing. Why? Because your purchases have gone down. What happens in the year third? Your COGS automatically goes down, ultimately increasing your gross profit. And that is what is happening right here. All right, sir, fair enough. We do get that. तो सर ये समझ में आ गया कि ऐसा ऐसा हुआ, तो इसको क्या बोलते हैं? इसको बोलते हैं लीफो लिक्विडेशन. एंड यू कैन क्लियरली सी यहाँ पे आपका ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट ऑफ थर्ड ईयर इज 30.1% एज कंपेयर टू द थर्ड ईयर हियर विच इज 29.3% इन केस ऑफ फीफो. तो फीफो का ग्रॉस प्रॉफिट कम आया जबकि फीफो का यूजुअली ज्यादा आता है. And that is the concept of LIFO liquidation. I hope you guys have understood this completely. Yes or no in the chat box. All right. Now we can move on to the next chapter. Whatever was relevant from this chapter, I have revised with you guys. The later part, which talks about, the ratio analysis and all of those things, I think that bit you guys are well equipped to handle. You've done ratios very well. So I hope you guys have, there's no problem there. So मैंने वो रिवीजन में नहीं डाला है क्योंकि आइडियली वो बहुत न्यूमेरिकल है और हमारा आइडिया था पूरा कॉन्सेप्ट रिवाइज करने का, तो वहाँ कोई कॉन्सेप्ट रिवाइज नहीं होगा प्रिसाइजली. Alright. Okay, so I'm going to move forward and I'm going to go to the next bit or the next reading, which is going to be analysis of long-term assets. What analysis of long-term assets is what we're going to start with. All right, sir, fair enough. Let's get started. Acha, before we start, guys, do you guys want a 5 minutes break? 5-10 minutes break कुछ चाहिए आप लोगों को कि मैं कंटिन्यू करूँ? Okay, guys, it's 2:26. Take a 5 minutes break. Then we are going to revise this chapter completely. Then we are going to take some break and then we are going to revise the income taxes wala chapter. All right. Also, the idea today with respect to income taxes is to make you guys understand deferred tax asset and deferred tax liability completely. बहुत अच्छे से. That's it. ठीक है? All right. It's 2:26. Take a 5 minutes break. 2:31, 2:35, 2:32. We'll meet around that time. All right, guys, let's get started again. Let's come to analysis of long-term assets. Let us start with what do you mean by intangible asset? We do understand what do you mean by intangible asset, something that can be that doesn't have a physical substance, right? It cannot be touched, right? Example, patent, the brand name that you have, the copyright that you have, franchisees, all of this is what? This is intangible asset. Now, intangible asset can either have what? A finite life or an infinite life, right? It can have a finite life or infinite life. Let's say, for example, I have a patent. I'm manufacturing this. Let's say, for example, I have made this drug which cures cancer, and I have filed a patent for that, which ultimately gives me exclusive right to only and only manufacture myself. No one else can sort of copy the drug, copy the formula of that. I have exclusive rights for that, but it is limited for a period of 5 years. Post that, anyone and everyone can start manufacturing, can sort of use the same formula, whatever that may be, they can start doing it. So how can they know the formula that we have? Of course they have the drug, they can sort of reverse calculate it, right? So the point is that that is what a patent with a finite life is, right? Sir, what do you mean by an intangible asset with an infinite life? Example can be a trademark, right? So a lot of brands sort of have a trademark. You must have written, you must have seen TM, at the bottom of it, at the bottom of a lot of logos, or that is what trademark, and it is usually for life. Okay, sir, what is exactly the accounting treatment for intangible assets, whether it is with finite life or whether it is with infinite life? Okay, sir, what do you mean by accounting treatment? By accounting treatment, I'm talking about depreciation. How you depreciate an asset. I hope you guys remember, we what amortize an intangible asset, right? We what amortize an intangible asset. All right, fair enough. Sir, in case of assets with finite intangible assets with finite life, what do you do? Sir, we amortize it over the life. So the patent that I was talking about to produce the cancer drug is only for a period of 5 years, right? So whatever be the value of that patent will be amortized over a period of 5 years. Okay, sir, the amortization happens over the useful life. Okay. Sir, do I test it for impairment? Yes, it is tested for impairment whenever the event is there which will indicate the possible loss in value. Okay, I had a patent that had a certain amount of value, but my competitive company came out with their own formula and ultimately started manufacturing themselves the drug of cancer. What happens? The exclusive rights that I had to manufacture that particular drug ultimately reduces in value. So I have to also test this particular patent, which is an intangible asset, for impairment. Impairment represents loss in value. Sir, amortization ultimately declines the value of assets. Impairment also declines the value of the asset, yes. Always remember, you don't get confused between the two. You should differentiate the two very well. Sir, amortization is a regular occurrence. It will keep on happening. It will keep on happening every year, right? The patent that I have has a life of how many years? Has a life of 5 years. So, sir, if it has a life of 5 years, it will be amortized every year. And what is amortization? Reduction in the value of asset. So, sir, it will be reduced every year for the next 5 years. That is what amortization is. But, sir, impairment is what? It is also a reduction in the value of asset. Okay, but only when what? But only when there is an indication that there is loss in value. So let's say, for example, I bought a patent and the value of the patent is 100 rupees and it is for a period of 5 years. So, sir, it will be amortized 20, 20, 20, 20, 20 every year. The value of the asset at the end of the first year will be 80. At the end of second year will be 60. At the end of third year, it will be 40. Sorry, 80, 60, 40. Yeah. At the end of the first year, at the end of fourth year, it will be 20. And at the end of fifth year, it will be what? Zero. But what if, sir, at the end of third year, there was an indication of possible loss in value? Okay, that declined the value of my patent from 40 to 30. Ideally, it should have been 40, but because of loss in value, I had to impair it down to 30. That means that year I will charge 20 rupees of amortization and 10 rupees of impairment loss in my books of accounts in the year three. Okay, sir, fair enough. So it comes down to 30. All right. Sir, so how would the amortization work for the rest of the life? Now 30 rupees is what is the value of the asset. Now the remaining life is 2 years. Now 30 divided by 2, 15 rupees of amortization for the rest of the remaining 2 years. So this will be 15 and 15. So value of the asset at the end of third year, at the end of fourth year will be 15, at the end of fifth year will be 0. That's how you differentiate. Please differentiate between depreciation and amortization very carefully. All right. And that is what your, sorry, please differentiate between amortization and impairment very carefully. My bad. All right. So impairment loss, again, it is recorded in the income statement in the period that it is recognized. So 10 rupees of loss that I have recognized will be ultimately recorded in the income statement. And also 20 rupees of amortization that comes in that year where the impairment has happened. Sir, what if the intangible asset that I was talking about has indefinite life? So, sir, if it has indefinite life, do I amortize it? No, there is no amortization for an asset. What intangible asset that has infinite life? I was talking about trademark. There is no amortization that happens. But, sir, do I check it for impairment? Yes. And there's a guideline that I have to check it for impairment at least annually. At least annually, I have to check for impairment. And of course, if it can be more often, if the indicators are there. If there's a potential loss in value, I'm not going to wait. अरे नहीं साल के end तक रुकेंगे. Do it. Do the impairment right now. Test for impairment right now. Sorry, not do. Test for impairment right now. And of course, impairment loss is recognized in the income statement. So, sir, what are we talking about? We're talking about intangible assets. Intangible assets are of two types: the one that is with finite life, the one that is with infinite life. Sir, finite life I amortize every year. Sir, I check for impairment? Yes, sir. Only when there's a potential loss in value. Sir, amortization results in loss in value. So does impairment. But do I differentiate between amortization and impairment? Yes, sir. Impairment is annually. Amortization is annual. Impairment is what? Only when there is a loss in value. All right, that's how we differentiate. So when I talk about indefinite, intangible assets with indefinite value, not indefinite value, indefinite life. So when I talk about intangible assets with an indefinite life, sir, what happens with respect to amortization there? Sir, there is no amortization. But do I check for impairment? Yes, sir, at least annually. And if the criteria exist, it can be more than annually as well. Only when the criteria exist. What do I mean by criteria exist? Sir, there can be potential loss in value because of anything that is there. Basically, there is an indicator. That is what it is. So that's how you talk about impairment. All right, with respect to intangible assets with indefinite life. All right. There is also intangible assets have been classified in two other different ways. Sir, what are those two other different ways? Earlier intangible assets the criteria that I sort of studied for classification was finite life and infinite life. All right, sir, let's go forward. Let's talk about intangible assets. But now the classification is what? Identifiable intangible assets and unidentifiable intangible assets. I will talk about impairment in detail later on. Don't worry. Impairment का पूरा एक टॉपिक मैंने बना के रखा है. We will talk about impairment in detail. Don't worry. Sir, what do you mean by identifiable intangible assets? Identifiable intangible assets are the assets that are capable of being separately sold. मेरे पास पेटेंट है. मैंने वो पेटेंट अलग से बेच दिया. क्या मैं बेच सकता हूँ? सबसे पहले तो क्वेश्चन इज, आई हैव अ पेटेंट, कैन आई सेल इट सेपरेटली? यस, आई कैन. So the criteria of being identifiable is met. So what do you mean by identifiable intangible assets? An asset that can be separately sold. And whenever I can sell an asset separately, that means it is capable of being separated from the firm. So it can be separated from the entity, or it arises as a result of contractual or legal rights. Patent is a legal right. It's a contractual right, and it can be sold separately as well. It can be separated from the entity as well. So, sir, what are we talking about, sir? We are talking about identifiable intangible assets. Identifiable intangible assets are the intangible assets that are capable of being separately sold. Sir, whenever I talk about capability of being separately sold, that means it can be separated from the firm. Sir, it should be arriving at it can be it can also be arriving as a contractual right or a legal right. Franchisee. Franchise is a contractual or legal right that you have, right? अब फ्रेंचाइजी आपको बेचना नहीं बेचना वो बात अलग है, बट ऑब्वियसली सर इट इज सेपरेट फ्रॉम द फॉर्म, राइट? सर दैट वाज द फर्स्ट क्राइटेरिया ऑफ आइडेंटिफाइबल इंटेंजिबल एसेट्स. Sir, what do you mean by that? Intangible assets are of two types. I'll again repeat: identifiable intangible assets, unidentifiable intangible assets. Identifiable intangible assets, you have to meet certain criteria. The first criteria is what we've studied so far. Sir, what is the second criteria? The firm should control it. For any asset, for you to recognize any asset, you should control that asset. That is very important. We have learned that so a lot of times, right? An asset is something that is controlled by the firm and is going to give future economic benefits, right? So it is controlled by the firm here. And obviously it is going to provide it is going to provide future economic benefits. So, sir, for an asset to be identifiable, three criteria have to be met. First criteria is going to be it can be separated from the firm. How do you identify that separated from the firm criteria or entity criteria? Sir, you can sell it separately, like a patent or something like that, or arises from a contractual or a legal right, franchising. So second criteria is it should be controlled by the firm. That means it should be owned in the name of the firm. And third criteria is that the future economic benefit should flow to the firm from that asset. When all these three criteria are met, the asset becomes an identifiable intangible asset. Okay, sir, what do you mean by unidentifiable intangible asset? Something that cannot be separated from the firm. Okay, so sir, we were talking about identifiable intangible assets, and we are talking about unidentifiable intangible assets now. Uh, Sir, it cannot be separated. The criteria of identifiable there was that it can be separated. Of course, if it cannot be separated, it will become unidentifiable. So it cannot be separated from the firm. What do you mean by separated from the firm? It cannot be sold separately. मतलब अगर मेरे को एज एन एंटिटी intangible asset अलग से नहीं बेचने मिल रहा है, that intangible asset becomes what? It becomes my unidentifiable intangible assets. So if a company cannot sell that particular intangible asset separately, it will be called as what? Unidentifiable intangible asset, meaning goodwill. एज अ कंपनी आई कैनॉट सेल माई गुडविल. ऐसा नहीं मैं सिर्फ मेरा गुडविल बेच दूं, मेरा रेपुटेशन ये ले मेरा रेपुटेशन. नो, दैट कांट हैपन, राइट? We all understand that goodwill is an intangible asset. Now, whether it is identifiable intangible asset or unidentifiable intangible asset, we have to check for the first criteria whether it is capable of being separately sold. Sir, no, sir, I cannot just sell goodwill. I will have to sell the entire business for me to be selling the goodwill as a company. Right? That is what this is. So, identifiable intangible assets are something that cannot be separately sold. तो सर आपने बोला पहले intangible assets have finite life, then it have infinite life. फिर आपने बोला intangible assets can be identifiable, it can be unidentifiable. सर आपने थोड़ा कुछ मिक्स नहीं कर दिया? Okay, let us try to identify that as well. So intangible asset can have either finite life or it can have either infinite life. Intangible assets can either be identifiable intangible assets or it can either be unidentifiable intangible assets. And you know what? Identifiable intangible assets can either have a finite life or it can either have an infinite life. And unidentifiable intangible assets usually have infinite life. Usually. गुडविल का कोई लाइफ नहीं होता कि भाई 10 साल की गुडविल है, बस 5 साल की गुडविल, 5 साल के बाद आपकी गुडविल गई, आपकी रेपुटेशन गई. नो, दैट कांट बी द केस, राइट? एंड व्हाट काइंड ऑफ गुडविल एम आई टॉकिंग अबाउट? आई एम टॉकिंग अबाउट गुडविल which is a result of what? Business combination. And I will have a discussion on these 2 points later on whenever we are discussing business combination. थोड़ा बहुत जब हम थोड़ा बहुत डिस्कस करेंगे, I'll have a discussion on these 2 points, so you'll understand that much better when we discuss those topics. But this was a brief background about intangible assets. It can either be finite, infinite, it can either be identifiable, unidentifiable. Whenever an intangible asset is finite, you have to amortize it, and also you have to make sure that you check for impairment if indicators exist, right? Amortization and impairment, they are two different things, but ultimately they both result in decline in the value of the asset. Sir, it can also be what? It can also be what? Infinite, in an intangible asset with infinite life, it should not be amortized, but what? It can be tested for impairment annually. That is at least. If indicators exist, sooner than that, right? Sir, other type of intangible assets are identifiable and unidentifiable. Sir, if it is identifiable, then should be capable of being separately sold, or it should arise at a contractual right or legal right. It should be controlled by the firm. It should be the future economic benefit should flow to the firm. So if it is unidentifiable, that what does that mean? It means that it cannot be separately sold. Example, goodwill. And sir, identifiable intangible assets can either have a finite life or infinite life, and unidentifiable intangible assets usually have an infinite life. And that is what the concept is. Also, one more thing, guys, you guys must have seen in the notes that I've just presented to you guys, I have not included disclosures anywhere. आपको इन्वेंट्री में याद है डिस्क्लोजर्स वाला टॉपिक था, वो मैंने वहां इंक्लूड नहीं किया क्योंकि वो थ्योरेटिकल टॉपिक है, आप सीधा सीधा पढ़ के समझ सकते हो. Alright, so that's why I've not included that. Same thing I've done here as well. There are certain disclosures with respect to as assets. I have not included any of that here. Now, what are the reporting conditions, guys? Not all the intangible assets are recognized on the balance sheet. You have to understand that very, very well. Not all intangible assets are recognized on the balance sheet. Sir, meaning, sir, what if the intangible asset is internally developed? Meaning, let's say, for example, goodwill, I was talking about goodwill. There are two types of goodwill. First, internally generated goodwill. And the second one is goodwill on business combination or acquisition. Sir, meaning I am Tata Motors. I have been working for a very long time and I've built a stellar reputation that my cars are very, very, what do you call, very sturdy. The quality is very superior. And that is the goodwill that I have in the market as Tata Motors. Can I recognize that goodwill as Tata Motors? No, I can't because it is an internally generated goodwill. It is an internal goodwill. It is the goodwill of Tata Motors, and Tata Motors can't recognize that on the balance sheet of Tata Motors. Why? Because it is very difficult to calculate the cost of that particular internally generated goodwill. And the first criteria of recognizing that asset of any asset is that you should measure that the cost of that asset should be measurable. And here you would not be able to measure the cost of the asset. Why? Because you don't know what has gone into creating that goodwill as Tata Motors for Tata Motors. Employees ने ज़्यादा काम किया होगा, employees would have been more motivated, they have worked more, whether it is because of superior R&D. There are so many things that have gone together to be able to make that goodwill, and it is very difficult to pinpoint and allocate the cost. Okay, sir, fair enough. So internally generated goodwill is not recognized. But what about goodwill on acquisition or business combination? Let's say, for example, Maruti Suzuki acquires Tata Motors, and as a result of this, buys the assets and liabilities of Tata Motors. Can Maruti Suzuki, let's say for example, the value of assets minus liability, the fair value of assets minus liability of Tata Motors is 100 crores. But Maruti Suzuki has paid 120 crores. That means 20 crores extra. That is because of what? That is because of the goodwill of Tata Motors. And now Maruti Suzuki can recognize goodwill in its books of accounts or basically on its balance sheet because this goodwill is generated of 20 crores as a result of acquisition of Tata Motors by Maruti Suzuki. Right. And that is how the whole criteria works in terms of goodwill. So if an intangible asset is internally generated, it will not be recognized. Example that I took was goodwill, but there's an exception to this, and we will discuss that. If the intangible asset was purchased externally, you can recognize it. If it is acquired through business combination, you can recognize this goodwill. Again, an example. Right. So there is a reporting consideration is what small topic. That's what, that's how you deal with it in terms of, whether they are purchased internally, they are acquired through business combination, they are purchased, whatever that may be. Let us have a discussion on intangible assets created internally. Sir, you told us goodwill, that is your self goodwill. What do you call that? Self goodwill or internally generated goodwill. Sir, that goodwill you will not recognize. But you said there's an exception to this. What is that exception? Research and development costs. What? Research and development cost. I was talking about a company developing a drug for cancer. Do you guys think that on the first day itself, the company, sort of can after okay, let me just put it this way, the company has sort of developed a formula and thinks that this formula will work for cancer, and once you have these the medicines that are going to be made out of this formula, it can cure your cancer. That is a belief of the company. So because of that belief, tomorrow can company directly launch it? No. Company will have to what? Will have to try it. There's going to be different phases of trial. First, it's going to be tried on animals, then it's going to be tried on humans, and it's going to take a lot of time before a company is able to develop a medicine and then ultimately launch in the market. Right. Or let's take another example. I am an electronic vehicle company and I want to launch, sorry, I am an automobile company and I want to launch electronic vehicle. So I obviously cannot directly, I thought that I would want to launch this and tomorrow I can launch it. No, I will have to do a certain amount of research. How are the batteries made? How exactly would the vehicle look like? What happens? Develop the prototype. All of those things would happen. Now, once I think that I'm sure that I think I can make a vehicle, what I will do, I will start developing, right? I will create the batteries. I will do all of that. A lot of things would go behind the scenes and I will try to develop the particular vehicle. The point is that I will incur expenses on this research and development. In case of cancer drug, the research phase would be finding out the formula, that what exactly would the formula be. I would have to have a group of scientists who are constantly working or constantly finding out these formulas. That's a research phase. Once I have cracked that this is what the formula looks like for the medicine, then I will start developing. I will start making few medicines. I will start testing those medicines. I will start what? I will start the clinical trials, phase one, phase two, phase three, stuff like that. Obviously, both the phases, which is the research phase of finding the formula and development phase of making the medicine, will require certain amount of cost. And that is what you mean by research and development cost. And you know what? The R&D cost, which is research and development cost, are treated differently under IFRS and under US GAAP. US GAAP का बहुत सिंपल है. रिसर्च कॉस्ट हो या डेवलपमेंट कॉस्ट हो, एक्सपेंस कर दो. Both research cost or development cost, just directly expense. Whatever you have incurred, directly expense, simple as that. So in research phase, you have incurred, let's say, $1 million, and in development phase, $10 million. Entire $11 million will be expensed and would go under income statement. But what does IFRS tell us? IFRS बोलता है रुक जाओ. IFRS बोलता है रुक जाओ. रिसर्च कॉस्ट को क्या करो? एक्सपेंस कर दो as incurred. So you had incurred $1 million on research, expense it. But what about the rest of the $10 million which you're incurring on developing the drug? IFRS says that you can capitalize that cost. And the moment you capitalize the development costs, what does it become? An intangible asset. Because it's a cost. It's not an asset that you own. It's a cost that you've sort of capitalized, and ultimately you're going to amortize it. Exactly like when you purchase an asset and you show that as an asset and you depreciate it over the life, exactly what you will do here. Okay, sir, fair enough. So that's what we'll do here. So we capitalize it. Okay. So intangible assets, the cost has been capitalized, which costs are development cost under IFRS. Sir, but is there some criteria for it? Yes, there is. IFRS says that whatever cost that you have incurred for developing the product can be capitalized only if this criteria is met, that there is technical feasibility, right? It is actually technically possible. Now, the cancer drug that I was talking about, that might not be a suitable example here. I will talk about, let's say, for example, flying taxis. I did a lot of research, and I think that okay, it is possible. And now I started developing it. But the point is it even technically possible? Is there a feasibility to it? Currently, no, sir. How the infrastructure looks like, how exactly they would function, what will happen, will this even fly for longer hours? No, sir. There is no actual proof to it that it can actually happen. Okay, so sir, technical feasibility is not yet established. So whatever our development cost is, can I capitalize it? No, sir, I can't. That is the first criteria. There has to be an intention to complete the asset. That I have started developing the cancer drug. Just because I wanted to capitalize certain cost, I developed and left the development in middle. And whatever was development cost, I sort of capitalized it and started amortizing it so that I could reduce my future profits. अरे नहीं भाई, asset complete करो. और कंप्लीट करके यूज करने का इंटेंशन होना चाहिए. यू हैव टू कंप्लीट इट, और इधर यू हैव टू यूज इट, और इधर यू हैव टू सेल इट. So the cancer drug that I have developed, now I have developed it completely, but I'm a small company. What do? I sell the formula to somebody else. So whatever I'm developing, the intention has to be to either complete to whatever I'm developing, the intention has to be to complete it and then either use it or either sell it. And obviously the future economic benefit has to be probable. And currently you have adequate resources to complete the project. What is the criteria? That intention has to be complete. Intention has to be to complete the project. You tell me, if you don't have adequate resources, can you complete the project? No. So if you don't have adequate resources, you cannot have the intention to complete. So these criteria have to be met for the development cost to be capitalized. Sir, in case of IFRS, research cost is always expense, development cost is capitalized only if these criteria are met. If the technical feasibility is there, if intention is to complete and sell the asset or use the asset, if the future economic benefits are probable, and the costs that are there can be, can be measured, and whatever the adequate resources are to complete the asset is kind of available. All right, sir, fair enough. So in US GAAP, sir, research and development, both the costs are what expensed. But in case of software, it is something else. Software is an exception. In the US, software is an exception. Okay, fair enough. Sir, how would that be an exception? Like, how would the research and development cost work there in terms of capitalization? Software you can develop either for selling to others, पहली चीज तो ये, or for or internal use. If you are establishing the software for selling to others, you are supposed to expense everything until technological feasibility is established. And the moment technological feasibility is established, till the time you decide to sell the product, whatever cost you incur, you have to capitalize those costs. So basically, for example, I'm developing a software and I want to sell this software. Now, till the time I establish technical feasibility, whatever cost is incurred, I will do what? I will expense it. And whatever cost is incurred post that, till the time it is ready for sale, it is ready for sale, whatever this cost is going to be capitalized. Sir, what do you mean by establishing the technological feasibility? Arey, whatever software I'm developing, is it even possible for people to use it? That is what the point is. Right. Okay, sir, fair enough. Sir, if it is for internal use, then what? If it is for internal use, then what? You're supposed to expense it till the time it is probable that project will be completed and used as intended. मतलब जब तक मुझे श्योरिटी नहीं मिलती that I will complete the project and I will use it for my internal purpose, till the time I'm not sure of these two factors, that I will complete the project and use for my own internal purpose, everything should be expensed, but the rest of it will always be what? Capitalized. And that is what the treatment in case of US GAAP is with respect to software. So US GAAP क्या बोलता है भाई, सारा का सारा रिसर्च और डेवलपमेंट कॉस्ट हमेशा कैपिटलाइज करो एक्सेप्ट फॉर सॉफ्टवेयर. और सॉफ्टवेयर के केस में क्या होगा, आई हैव जस्ट डिस्प्लेड इट टू यू गाइस. सो इन केस ऑफ रिसर्च एंड डेवलपमेंट विच इज एन इंटरनली जनरेटेड कॉस्ट, विच इज एन इंटरनली जनरेटेड एसेट, research cost in case of IFRS is always expense, and development cost will be capitalized only if those criteria are met, or those criteria are met. In case of US GAAP, what happens in case of US GAAP? None of the research, or I mean, no research, no development cost, none of that is going to be capitalized. It is always going to be expensed. But the rest of the cost, which is, but the exception, which is the software cost, for that, obviously you can capitalize it, but it depends upon whether you're internally using it or you're, sort of selling it to others. If it is selling it to others, then, until the time technological feasibility is established, you sort of expense everything. After that, till the time of sale, you sort of capitalize everything. And if it is for internal use, then until the time you're not sure that you're going to complete the asset and use the asset as it is intended for its original use, until that time you sort of, are going to be expensing everything, and post that you're going to capitalize everything. Right. So, sir, we were talking about accounting treatment. We understood the accounting treatment of internally developed assets. Example that we took was R&D, which is research and development. Let us talk about the assets that are purchased externally. Assets that are purchased externally, what about that? Let us take an example. Let us try to understand theory behind it. So obviously, whenever I purchase an asset externally, what should the initial recognition be? Because I have purchased the asset externally. Obviously, it is going to be recorded on cost, at cost in the balance sheet, which is what? Which is the fair value at acquisition. Whenever you purchase an intangible asset, what are you going to pay? You're going to pay fair value, and that will become your cost. Sir, but what if I have acquired that intangible asset as a part of a group? Basically, I have just not bought intangible asset. I have bought multiple things along with intangible assets, and I have paid a lump sum price for it. So I've paid $1 lakh. In $1 lakh, I have not only bought intangible asset, but I've also purchased every other things as well. What do I do? So, sir, I will allocate the total purchase price on the basis of fair value of each asset that I have purchased. तो अगर मैंने 3 asset खरीदे, दो उसमें tangible थे, एक intangible था, this is a tangible asset, intangible asset, whatever their fair value is, I have paid in total $1 lakh. The fair value of one is $30,000, the other one is $60,000, $50,000, and this one is actually $30,000. So I will allocate this $1 lakh in the proportion of their fair value. So total fair value is 30 plus 50, 80, 80 plus 30, 110. So amount that will be allocated to tangible asset is going to be 30 divided by 110 into total purchase price that is paid is 1 lakh. तो जो भी amount आता है, that becomes the proportionate cost that is allocated to tangible asset. Same goes for intangible asset. Right? Example can be franchisee rights. A lot of times you'll acquire franchisee rights along with other assets as well, right? So if I'm taking a franchisee of a particular company, let's say Domino's, they will not only sell me the franchisee rights, but they will also sell me other things like inventory and everything else. But the point is that what matters is what is the type of asset that is being acquired rather than the exact allocation of purchase cost. Basically, what are you acquiring? Are you acquiring franchisee rights? Are you acquiring some other type of intangible asset? That matters. Why? Because whether it will have finite life, indefinite life, all of those things will ultimately be, or whether it has, what do you call, whether it is being separately capable of being separately sold or not, and stuff like that. Of course, something that is capable of being separately sold, not capable of being separately sold is usually not purchased. But the point is that what kind of asset you're acquiring matters a lot because the future treatment of that particular intangible asset will depend upon finite, indefinite, infinite, stuff like that, all of those things. Sir, whenever I capitalize an intangible asset, what is the effect of it? What happens whenever I capitalize an intangible asset? Remember, we understood analysis of income statement. And when we were doing analysis of income statement, I told you guys that rather than expensing an entire expense of the asset in the first year itself, if you capitalize it, what happens? You will proportionately recognize the expense every year. So the moment you capitalize it, what happens? In the first year, higher net income comes as compared to directly recognizing the entire expense of purchasing the asset in the first year itself. So let's say, for example, I have paid 100 rupees to purchase an asset, intangible asset, and I have decided to capitalize it. And the life of the intangible asset is 5 years. So what will happen in terms of amortization every year? So 20, 20, 20, 20. But what if I did not capitalize it? So this entire 100 would have been expense in the first year itself, thereby reducing the net income in the first year and increasing the net income in the further years. But the moment I amortize it, what happens? 20, 20, 20, my net income will be reduced proportionately every year. So the moment I capitalize it, what happens? Higher net income is there in the first year as compared to completely expensing it. And obviously in subsequent year, net income will be lower because you're subtracting 20, 20, 20 every year. Whereas complete capitalization, complete expensing would not have any expense in the rest of the years. Obviously, if I'm capitalizing, what happens? Sir, if you were expensing, sir, no asset and liability was recognized. But no asset was recognized. But the moment you're capitalizing, what happens, sir? Your asset is recognized. So you have higher assets. And the moment you capitalize it, what happens? Sir, your equity also goes up. Why? Because in the first year, you have higher retained earnings because your expense was lower. And obviously, what happens to the cash flows? So your cash flows are higher. Operating cash flows ultimately in true essence is going to be higher. Sir, why my operating cash flow is going to be higher if I decide to capitalize an asset rather than expensing an asset? Because whatever I spend on purchasing an asset, if it is what? If it is expensed, entire amount comes to operating cash flow. But if it is capitalized, entire amount will go in what? Because I'm purchasing an asset here, will go in what? Investing. And it will not be an operating expense, thus will not come up or not form a part of operating cash flow. Right. And you have to understand the difference between purchased asset versus internally generated asset. Internally generated intangible assets are usually expensed, right? Whatever you sort of internally generate is always expense unless and until it is an R&D or, you know, I think it's only R&D for that matter. There's no other exception there. And obviously, sir, internally generated intangible assets, sir, what do you mean by that? Arey, I would have been doing a lot of other things now. Ideally, chalo, let's take an example. Let's take an example. I'm talking about research expense that I'm spending. I'm doing a certain research of a particular product. Okay, sir, ideally this research expense is going to yield results in the future. So this should be an asset, right? Okay, what assets are intangible asset? But sir, IFRS, US GAAP, everyone tells me just expense it. So generally, whatever intangible asset is, and I'm using the word intangible asset loosely, it is exactly not intangible asset, I'm just saying loosely कि सर जो भी आप रिसर्च का खर्चा कर रहे हो वो सारा का सारा आपको शायद फ्यूचर में कुछ इकोनॉमिक बेनिफिट दे सकता था बट इट इज नॉट बीइंग recognized as an intangible asset. Why? Because IFRS US GAAP everyone tells that expense कर दो except for R&D, मतलब development cost, not R&D, development cost that we have done in case of IFRS. In case of software, we understood this. That will result in because you have internally generated, uh, uh, loosely using intangible assets, the word again, your assets are lower in the balance sheet because you're not recognizing anything, everything is being expensed. And if it is purchased, everything is capitalized. That will result in what? Higher reported assets and ultimately equity. Why equity is going up? Because sir, retained earnings are up in the first year. And this difference can significantly affect profitability ratios. Profitability ratios, why, sir? Because in case of expensing, first year net income is going to be lower, ultimately resulting in lower net profit margin. But in case of capitalizing, first year net income is going to be what? Is going to be not that lower, ultimately increasing the, what do you call, your net profit margin. Asset turnover ratio would also be affected, sir. Because why? Because my assets will be different. If it is internally generated, sir, no asset is recognized or no asset is capitalized. No intangible asset is recognized in the first place. But if it's purchased, what happens, sir? You have an intangible asset that has been recognized. All right. And leverage metrics are also affected. Debt to equity, debt to total asset, that is also getting affected, right? Because equity and everything else is impacted as well. And that is what purchase versus internally generated asset is. Sir, what about intangible assets that are recognized or obtained as a result of business combination? What are we talking about? Goodwill, precisely. So let's say, for example, a company, the fair value of the assets of a company. Sir, why do I take fair value and not cost? Because whenever I'm acquiring a company, I will take over the assets of the company and I will take over the liability of the company. Sir, so basically, if Byju's is acquiring Akash, so Byju's is acquiring Akash. So in that case, sir, is going to completely take over the assets of Akash. Okay, is going to completely take over the liabilities of Akash. Yes, but Akash is not going to sell just like that. Akash will say that, listen, you are taking over my asset, you're taking over my liability, but you are supposed to take them over at fair value and not cost. Fair value is the market value. Sir, why fair value and not cost? Because obviously it's a takeover and it would want to value. Basically, Akash would want it or want its business to be valued in today's terms and not some old cost that he has recognized because he's precisely selling. Right. So whenever a company acquires other company, what happens? Sir, whenever a company acquires other company, what happens, sir? All the assets are taken over by the company and liabilities are taken over by the company. Which one? Acquiring. So Byju's will take over the assets and liability. At what value? Fair value. So obviously, what would Byju's want to pay, sir? Byju's will say that the fair value of the assets is 100. Arey, but listen, I'm also taking over a liability. So that is also like a problem for me. So 50 rupees is the fair value of the liability. 40 rupees is the fair value of liability. So ideally, I should be paying you 60. Okay, sir, ideally, you should be paying you 60. But you know what? Uh, I ended up paying 80. Sir, what about the extra 20 that is being paid? That is because of the goodwill or reputation of Akash. So Byju's can recognize that 20 as goodwill in its books of accounts. Sir, what else does Byju's recognizes in terms of Akash? Byju's will recognize all the assets of Akash. Byju's will recognize all the liabilities of Akash. Byju's will recognize his goodwill in case of Akash that has been generated as a result of what do you call acquisition. So that is what would happen. So that's how you ultimately, that's how goodwill is recognized in case of acquisition method. Okay, sir, but let's say, for example, sir, 60 was the fair value of the asset minus liability in case of Akash when Byju's acquired Akash. Okay, and actually, 90 rupees is what is paid by Byju's to Akash. Okay, fair enough. Or let me just use a different example this way, actually, not Byju's and Akash. Let me just say that, let's say, for example, let's take a big pharmaceutical company. ठीक है? So, let's say Sun Pharma has acquired a small pharma company. Reason? This small pharma company has cracked the drug of cancer. Sun Pharma decides, let us just acquire this particular company. Okay, another example. No, I think this example is perfect. Okay, sir, so small pharma company they have acquired. The fair value of asset minus liability of that small pharma company is 60. But okay, but Sun Pharma has paid 90. Okay, you know what? This small pharma company has done research and of course development to develop that drug, right? Okay. Uh, so the formula that has been developed, certain research costs have been spent and certain development costs have been spent. Okay, sir, certain research costs have been spent, certain development costs have been spent. By whom? By the small pharma company. Arey, but remember, IFRS and US GAAP both tells us that, listen, research cost will always be expensed. And development cost will be what? Will be capitalized only if the criteria is met. In case of IFRS, US GAAP तो वो भी permission नहीं देता. Okay, sir, so what are you trying to get at? You know what? Sun Pharma, because this small pharma company has done research, has done research is ahead than rest of the competition. Okay, sir, fair enough, is ahead than rest of the competition. That means, are you telling us that Sun Pharma has also paid this small pharma company for the research it has done? अरे बट सर, कैंसर का ड्रग जो डेवलप हुआ उसका रिसर्च एंड डेवलपमेंट तो हो गया, ड्रग तो बन गया ना पूरा पूरा. Okay, sir, fair enough. But you know what? The small pharma company was just not researching for the drug of cancer, it was also researching about other drugs. तो the other drugs का research जो हुआ है by the small pharma company which was expensed, Sun Pharma is already ahead than the rest of the competition because it has acquired that small pharma company. And obviously, because it has acquired that small pharma company, it has paid for that research as well. तो पता है अपने बुक्स ऑफ अकाउंट्स में वो रिसर्च, लेट्स से इट हैज पेड 90 एंड द कॉस्ट एलोकेटेड टू दैट रिसर्च इज 10 रुपीज, वो उस रिसर्च को एक इंटेंजिबल एसेट बताएगा और रेस्ट ऑफ द 20 विल बिकम गुडविल. सर एक बार वापस बताओ ना, पूरा पूरा एग्जांपल सर, समझा नहीं. लेट्स से फॉर एग्जांपल अगेन आई रिपीट एंड आई मेक इट इजियर फॉर यू दिस टाइम. लेट्स से फॉर एग्जांपल सर, देयर इज सन फार्मा, it has acquired a small pharma company which is in not, let's say that has not developed a drug, that is in a research phase. So this small pharma company is in research phase. Okay, fair enough. It is in research phase of a lot of different drugs for cancer, for increasing the life expectancy, etc., etc. A lot of things, that is what it is currently developing. Okay, fair enough. Sir, Sun Pharma, the fair value of assets minus liability is 60 for small pharma company. Sun Pharma has actually ended up paying 90. Okay, and this company is in research phase. So whatever expenses it has incurred for that research, it has expensed all of those expenses. But you know what? When Sun Pharma has acquired this small pharma company, all the research done by small pharma company belongs to Sun Pharma now. Okay, fair enough. And you know what? The research phase that small pharma company was going through, the expenses that it has incurred for all of that research phase is actually 10 rupees. So ideally, small pharma company cannot recognize that as an asset because it is going to be expensed, but the Sun Pharma can recognize that as an asset. At what price, sir? 10 rupees. So out of 60, that is the fair value of liability minus equity. Sorry, out of 90 that is paid, 60 belongs to the fair value of asset minus liability, 10 belongs to that research that Sun Pharma is buying, and 20 belongs to goodwill. So purchase price, which is 90, is allocated to what? Identifiable assets and liabilities of the firm at the fair value 60. Any intangibles the acquired company had internally developed. The company that is acquired is small pharma company. Whatever they have internally developed. Also, obviously, if they meet the recognition criteria, that matters. That will be 10, and the remaining amount, which is 20, will become my goodwill, which is balancing figure. Okay, fair enough. Right. सर व्हाट आर द रिकग्निशन क्राइटेरिया? सर आपने वहां पे थोड़ा सा रिकग्निशन क्राइटेरिया मीट करने बोला था, वो क्या है? अंडरस्टैंड दिस वेरी केयरफुली. टू कैपिटलाइज द प्रीवियसली एक्सपेंस्ड इंटेंजिबल ऑफ द अक्वायर्ड कंपनी. और मैं डिटेल में जा रहा हूँ ये कॉन्सेप्ट में क्योंकि बहुत बच्चों को यहाँ कंफ्यूजन होता है. To capitalize the previously expensed intangibles of the acquired company. Sir, matlab Sun Pharma acquiring the small pharma company, whatever the name of that company is, उसने जो रिसर्च किया था वो तो उसने एक्सपेंस कर दिया. उसका वो इंटरनली जनरेटेड इनटैंजिबल एसेट हो सकता था, बट अलाउड नहीं है, इसके लिए उसको एक्सपेंस करना पड़ा. सन फार्मा अल्टीमेटली वेनेवर इट इज सन फार्मा अल्टीमेटली वेनेवर इट इज अक्वायरिंग दिस पर्टिकुलर कंपनी कैन ऑल्सो recognize that research expense as an intangible asset only if this criteria is met. सर तो मतलब आप बोल रहे हो रिसर्च एक्सपेंस हमको जनरली रिकॉग्नाइज नहीं करना है एज एन इंटेंजिबल एसेट, बट सर अगर कोई एक्वायर कर रहा है तो उस केस में कर सकते हैं. यस, ओनली इफ द क्राइटेरिया इज मेट. They must qualify as an identifiable intangible asset. That is what the criteria is. मतलब सन फार्मा का जो रिसर्च है, it should be capable of being separately sold. That's the only time. Sorry, not Sun Pharma, small pharma company. Small pharma company का जो research expense है, that can only be recognized as an asset only if it is capable of being separately sold. That is very, very important. Right. And goodwill, so we do understand goodwill is what? Purchase price minus fair value of net assets acquired minus the fair value of identifiable intangible asset that was previously unrecognized. मतलब मैंने कितना दिया purchase price 90, fair value of net assets मतलब assets minus liability कितना है 60 और ये कितना है 10, तो कितना आता है goodwill 20. And goodwill is what? Asset unidentifiable because it cannot be separately sold as we have already discussed ऊपर. Remember, goodwill only from business combination is recognized, right? The internally generated goodwill is never recognized. It is expensed when incurred. सर इंटरनल जनरेटेड गुडविल इज एक्सपेंस when incurred मतलब अरे जो भी गुडविल बन रही है जिन एक्सपेंसेस की वजह से वो सारे के सारे एक्सपेंसेस एक्सपेंस ही होंगे. दे आर नॉट गोइंग टू बी रिकॉग्नाइज्ड एज अ गुडविल. एंड गुडविल इज नॉट amortized but it is checked for impairment annually or whenever the criteria exist. Guys, understood this part? This part is a bit tricky. I'll again repeat for you guys what is happening. Sir, whenever a company is acquiring another company, Sun Pharma acquiring a small pharma company, sir, let's say for example it has paid 90, the fair value of assets minus liability of that company is 60, whatever extra is being paid, that is 30 rupees, can be allocated either to goodwill or some bit of it can be allocated to what? The previously unrecognized internally generated assets. Which one? Intangible. So a small pharma company had done certain research. Sun Pharma is ahead in that research because of acquiring that small pharma company. But whatever expenses that small pharma company is incurred on the research is ultimately recognized as what? Is ultimately recognized as a cost by that particular company. But when Sun Pharma acquires that company, it is going to benefit from that research and ultimately can capitalize that research expenses. But sir, but why? But sir, there's a criteria for it. What is that criteria? That the research expenses should be identifiable intangible asset. That means it should be capable of being separately sold. So whatever 90 is being paid, sir, 10 rupees belong to that, 60 to that, and remaining becomes 20. Remaining 20 becomes goodwill. अगेन नॉट वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट बट अगेन कॉन्सेप्चुअली बहुत लोगों को बच्चों को यहाँ पे प्रॉब्लम होता है सो दैट्स व्हाई आई हैड एक्सप्लेन्ड इट. गाइस, एवरीवन इज विथ मी सो फार? यस और नो? नॉट वेरी वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट बट अगेन कॉन्सेप्चुअली बहुत लोगों को बच्चों को यहाँ पे प्रॉब्लम होता है सो दैट्स व्हाई आई हैड एक्सप्लेन्ड इट. गाइस, एवरीवन इज विथ मी सो फार? यस और नो? नॉट वेरी वेरी. अरे बोलो यस और नो एवरीवन. आई एम वेटिंग. ऑलराइट, लेट्स मूव फॉरवर्ड. लेट्स टॉक अबाउट इम्पेयरमेंट. ऑलराइट, लेट्स टॉक अबाउट इम्पेयरमेंट. सर, अब इम्पेयरमेंट है क्या? याद रखना, इम्पेयरमेंट इज डिफरेंट देन डी रिकग्निशन. सबसे पहली चीज तो ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है. देर आर टू डिफरेंट कॉन्सेप्ट्स. फर्स्ट इज इम्पेयरमेंट एंड द सेकेंड वन इज डी रिकग्निशन. डी recognition means asset will not be recognized in your books of accounts anymore, and I will have discussion around derecognition in some time. But let us understand what do you mean by impairment. Impairment is loss in the value of asset, something that is unanticipated. It is an unanticipated decline in assets value below its carrying value. अर्निंग कैपेसिटी असेट की कम हो जाती है. द अर्निंग कैपेसिटी ऑफ द असेट रिड्यूसेस. Both IFRS and US GAAP require recognition on impairment losses in the income statement. Currently, the capacity or the value of the asset is 90, but in the books of accounts, the carrying value of the asset is 100. This is the earning capacity of the asset. What? This is the earning capacity of the asset. That means, sir, the carrying value is 100, the earning capacity of the asset has been declined to 90. This is the unanticipated decline in the value of the asset. Okay. You know what? US GAAP and IFRS both require the recognition of the loss of this 10. Of course, the way impairment is checked is different in IFRS and US GAAP. What I'm trying to tell you guys right now is on a higher level. And if the impairment loss is material, that is, it is very high or it is of significance and it is unusual, it is not infrequent, basically, it is not frequent, it's infrequent, it will be recognized as an unusual or infrequent item in your books of accounts. Again, this is okay. That's just a normal thing that I not very important. Let us understand the impairment process both in case of IFRS and US GAAP. Let us start in case of IFRS. First, understand always there is a trigger event. There is always what? Trigger event. ट्रिगर इवेंट मतलब इम्पेयरमेंट हुआ या नहीं हुआ, यस और नो. सेकंड इज इफ इम्पेयरमेंट हुआ है तो कितना. इफ इम्पेयरमेंट हैज हैपेंड देन हाउ मच. दैट इज व्हाट द पॉइंट इज. तो ट्रिगर इवेंट तो हम समझते हैं सर, that it tells us that whether impairment has happened or not. The second aspect of that particular thing tells us that how much the impairment has happened if impairment happens. Basically, how much impairment has happened if impairment happens. Okay, sir, let us understand the trigger event. What exactly is the trigger event in case of IFRS? First, understand you have to assess what you have to assess for impairment annually. Sir, but if event exists, what event which indicate impairment should we check? Yes, then also we should check. So annually is just a yardstick कि यार एटलीस्ट एनुअली तो करो. बट अगर कोई इंडिकेशन दिख रहा है कि एसेट की वैल्यू में फॉल हो चुका है तब भी चेक करो. ओके सर, व्हाट एग्जैक्टली इज द ट्रिगर इवेंट. सर ट्रिगर इवेंट क्या है. सर ट्रिगर इवेंट कैन बी दैट देयर इज अ सिग्निफिकेंट डिक्लाइन इन मार्केट वैल्यू. मेरे पास जो एसेट था ना उसका मार्केट वैल्यू बहुत ज्यादा गिर गया. द मार्केट वैल्यू जस्ट केप्ट वेंट गोइंग डाउन गोइंग डाउन गोइंग डाउन. दैट्स एन इवेंट. व्हाट ट्रिगर इवेंट दैट इम्पेयरमेंट हैज हैपेंड. ओके सर, सिग्निफिकेंट चेंजेस इन एसेट्स फिजिकल कंडीशन. ओके सर, एसेट का फिजिकल कंडीशन बहुत सिग्निफिकेंटली चेंज हो गया मतलब मेरे गोडाउन में आग लगी थी. आई हैड दैट एसेट देयर एंड अल्टीमेटली द एसेट वाज, वन फोर्थ इट गॉट डिस्ट्रॉयड. ओनली थ्री फोर्थ इज लेफ्ट. ओके, दैट्स ऑल्सो एन इंडिकेशन ऑफ इम्पेयरमेंट. इट्स अ ट्रिगर इवेंट. दैट मीन्स इम्पेयरमेंट must have happened. Adverse changes in technology is there. Sir, what are the asset that I had was of a certain technology, and now suddenly technology has changed and evolved a lot, and ultimately that indicates that my asset is not very useful anymore. Markets have changed, economies have changed, laws have changed. Okay, so there is a trigger event, sir. The trigger event tells us whether the impairment has happened or not happened. Okay, fair enough. All right. Okay, wait, hold on. Sorry, guys. मैंने आपको बोला impairment happened, not happened. My bad. एक सेकंड. भूल जाओ. एक मिनट रुक जाओ. मैंने आपको हैपन नॉट हैपन बोल दिया. सॉरी, वेट, गलती हो गई, मेरे से गलती हो गई. होल्ड ऑन गाइस, लेट मी रिफ्रेज क्विकली गाइस. ओके, फॉरगेट एवरीथिंग व्हाट आई हैव टॉट सो फार इन टर्म्स ऑफ आईएफआरएस एंड यूएस गैप जहां से मैंने स्टार्ट किया था. गाइस क्विकली लेट अस स्टार्ट विद आईएफआरएस. गाइस फर्स्ट इज द ट्रिगर इवेंट, राइट. व्हाट डज ट्रिगर इवेंट इंडिकेट. देयर इज पॉसिबल इम्पेयरमेंट. Sir, impairment means loss in the value of the asset. We do understand that. If the impairment has happened, we have to recognize the loss. Sir, IFRS is a different rule. US GAAP has a different rule. Let us start with IFRS. In IFRS, first thing that we learn about impairment is a trigger event. Trigger event indicates that there's a possible impairment. There is what? Possible impairment. Happen, not happen, नहीं. वो गलत था. वो मैंने गलत बोला. There is possible impairment. Okay, sir, fair enough. There is possible event impairment. What are those events that indicate possible impairment? First is the significant decline in market value. सर मार्केट वैल्यू ऑफ द एसेट हैज सिग्निफिकेंटली डिक्लेयर्ड. इनका मतलब सर इम्पेयरमेंट शायद हो सकता है. इट इज एन इंडिकेटिव, इट इज इंडिकेटिंग दैट देयर इज एन इम्पेयरमेंट. सर सिग्निफिकेंट चेंजेस इन एसेट्स फिजिकल कंडीशन. ओह सर, इट इंडिकेट्स दैट देयर माइट बी इम्पेयरमेंट. सर एडवर्स चेंजेस इन टेक्नोलॉजी. ओह, इट इंडिकेट्स दैट देयर इज एन इम्पेयरमेंट. ओके, तो सर एक ट्रिगर इवेंट आ गया जिसने मुझे सोचने पे मजबूर कर दिया. इट हैज सॉर्ट ऑफ पुट मी इन अ डायरेक्शन और सॉर्ट ऑफ it insists on me thinking that okay, there might be impairment that must have happened. Okay, there's a doubt in my head now. The impairment must have happened. How do I confirm that doubt? By The second step, which compares cost or recoverable value. What cost or recoverable value? Sir, what exactly is recoverable value of amount or amount? It is going to be higher of fair value less cost to sell or value news. So, sir, what are you trying to tell us, sir? In case of IFRS, how do you check for impairment? Sir, first thing we understand if there's a trigger event or not. If there's a trigger event, it leads us into a direction that impairment must have happened. Sir, if impairment must have happened, how do I calculate whether impairment has happened or not happened? Sir, okay, we're going to confirm that by comparing cost or recoverable value. Sir, recoverable value is what, sir? It is going to be higher of fair value less cost to sell or value news. Sir, fair value less cost to sell is the market price of that particular product minus the cost to sell. Cost to sell is whatever I incur to sell that particular product. Ultimately, that is what fair value less cost to sell is. Sir, okay, sir, recoverable value is higher of fair value less cost to sell or value news. Sir, what is value news? It is present value of future cash flows from that particular asset and the disposable value that I get from that particular asset. Because disposable value is also a cash inflow. So what is value news? Whatever value I'm going to get, whatever cash flows I'm going to get out of that asset plus the disposable value. So whatever is higher, basically value in use or fair value less cost to sell ultimately gives me what? Recoverable value. And what is my what how do I compare my impairment cost or recoverable value? If cost of the asset is 100 but recoverable value is 90, that means asset is impaired by 10. And that is how my doubt that impairment might have happened is confirmed by comparing cost or recoverable value. Right. Okay. So you compare carrying value with the recoverable value. If this is the case where carrying value is greater than the recoverable amount, then impairment exists and you have to write down the asset value to the recoverable amount, basically to 90. And the loss is going to be 100 minus 90, that is 10. And this loss is recognized in income statement. Sir, what if impairment reverses? The recoverable value actually goes up. Okay, sir, recoverable value is now 105. Okay, can I reverse my impairment? Yes, I can. I can bring the value of the asset from 90 to 105. No, I can't. From 90, I can reverse the value of the asset only to the extent of original cost, which is 100, or carrying value, not original cost, carrying value. Original cost वो inventory से आता था बोलने की. What I'm trying to tell you guys is, sir, reversal is possible, but only to the extent of the carrying value. Sir, मतलब only to the extent of the impairment loss that was earlier recognized. आपने impairment loss कितना recognize किया? 10. आपका रिवर्सल हुआ तो आप 90 से आपके एसेट की वैल्यू सिर्फ 10 से बढ़ा सकते हो फ्रॉम 90. दैट मीन्स यू कैन टेक इट टिल 100, विच इज द कैरिंग वैल्यू. तो सर, impairment is allowed for identifiable for sorry, my bad. Impairment reversal is allowed only for identifiable long lived assets. For unidentifiable assets, no sir, it is not allowed. And the impairment is limited only to the original amount of impairment loss. So what exactly do you mean by impairment, sir? Impairment is loss in the value of the asset. Sir, ठीक है sir. It is different from derecognition? Yes, sir. Sir, loss in the value of the asset means the earning capacity of the asset has gone down. Sir, let us understand how do you check for impairment in case of IFRS? Sir, IFRS के केस में we need to check for impairment at least annually. कि हमको annually तो देखना चाहिए impairment हुई कि नहीं हुई है. या तो when the possible trigger event exists. Sir, what are the trigger events, sir? Loss in the value of the asset, sir. Significant value asset की गिर गई market में, मतलब price गिर गई, sir. That is one of the criteria, sir. That is one of the trigger events, sir. उसके अलावा क्या क्या, sir? Technological advancements हो गई, बहुत सारी ऐसी चीजें which sort of indicate that impairment might have happened. How do I confirm my doubt that impairment might have happened? I compare cost and recoverable value. Sir, cost is what, sir? Cost ultimately we understand, sir. Cost is ultimately the carrying value of the asset that is there in my books of accounts. Okay, sir, the carrying value is calculated by whatever the amount of whatever the cost is minus the depreciation. That is what carrying value is. ठीक है सर, तो कैरिंग वैल्यू हमको समझ में आ गया. सर, रिकवरेबल अमाउंट इज व्हाट, सर? इट इज द हायर ऑफ फेयर वैल्यू लेस कॉस्ट टू सेल और वैल्यू इन. Sir, fair value less cost to sell is what, sir? We understand that whatever the fair value market price is minus cost to sell is whatever I incur to sell the asset. And sir, what is value news, sir? Value news is higher of the future present value of the future cash flows and whatever the amount you're going to get out of disposal. Okay, sir. If whatever is higher, we take that becomes a recoverable amount, and then I compare that with cost. If the cost is ultimately lower than recoverable value, the asset would have impaired. So if the cost is 100, basically carrying value. When I say cost, carrying value, समझ लेना please. So whenever the cost is 100 and the recoverable amount is 90, that means the asset has impaired by 10. Sir, how impairment loss is going to be recognized in the income statement of 10. Okay, sir, fair enough. So is the reversal allowed? Tomorrow, if the recoverable value goes from 90 to 105, is the reversal allowed? Yes, only to the extent of the original carrying value, which is 100, from where the impairment was done. Right, that is what it is. And reversal is allowed only for identifiable long-lived assets and for nothing else. and that is what your reversal rule is. So how does impairment work in US GAAP? Now in US GAAP, impairment is a little complicated, but you have to understand there exists a trigger event as well here. What is trigger event? It indicates that there might be impairment, right? तो सर IFRS क्या बोलता था? IFRS ये बोलता था in terms of trigger event that listen, at least check annually, or it used to tell us when the event exists, which might indicate there is possible impairment. Sir, the event example we did, पता है यूएस गैप क्या बोलता है? यूएस गैप बोलता है एनुअली वैनुअली करने की जरूरत नहीं है, ओनली व्हेन इवेंट एग्जिस्ट्स, ओनली व्हेन इवेंट एग्जिस्ट्स। तो सर प्लीज एक बार पूरा पूरा रिपीट कर दो ना, व्हाट आर वी टॉकिंग अबाउट? वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इम्पेयरमेंट। सर इम्पेयरमेंट में हमने क्या देखा? आईएफआरएस देखा। सर आईएफआरएस में वी अंडरस्टूड दैट यू शुड चेक फॉर इम्पेयरमेंट annually, yes, or when the event exists. So what are the events we understood? So event might indicate that there is a possible impairment. How do I confirm that possibility? Sir, from lower of cost or NRV. Sorry, not cost or NRV, lower of carrying value or recoverable amount. मैं carrying value यूज करता हूँ, cost नहीं यूज करता हूँ। recoverable value of और carrying value whichever is, we compare that and we sort of understand that. ठीक है, और वो क्या होगा आगे, you sort of remember that. सर इन केस ऑफ यूएस गैप हाउ डू आई कंपेयर? इन केस ऑफ यूएस गैप हाउ डू आई कंपेयर? सर सबसे पहले तो ये बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट है टू अंडरस्टैंड दैट इन यूएस गैप इम्पेयरमेंट शुड बी टेस्टेड only when event exists and not annually. That means I should check for impairment only when event exists and not annually. This is very important to understand. Also, sorry guys, sort of, I don't know, for the last 5-10 minutes I lost the link. Yeah, I think possible fatigue from the weekend. But yeah, really sorry, we lost the link a little. But anyway, I'll come coming back into the groove again. Okay, so what I was talking about is, guys, US gap. I was talking about US gap right now. And in US gap, in case of US gap, sir, impairment कैसे work करता है? First, sir, you should check for impairment. You should test for impairment. Sir, only what? Only when event or conditions exist. Okay, sir. Now the event or condition is existing. Same. All of those things have happened. Technological feasibility is gone, and all of those things have happened. ठीक है. These are the trigger events. Sir, okay, sir. The event or conditions is sort of existing. We understand that. Okay, sir, how do I check? How do I confirm my doubt that impairment must have happened? For that, I have to adopt two-step approach. First step is recoverability test, and second test is loss measurement. Recoverability test tells us that whether impairment has happened or not. So basically, it confirms our doubt. So, sir, event and condition gives us a doubt. Okay, sir, that doubt is confirmed by recoverability test, which tells us impairment has happened or not. And the second is loss measurement, which is the second step, which tells us how much impairment has happened. मैंने आपको गलती से जो ऊपर आईएफआरएस में बोला था ना, वो ये बोल दिया था. दैट इज व्हाट माय मिस्टेक वाज. तो सर व्हाट एग्जैक्टली, सर अगेन आई रिपीट, इन केस ऑफ यूएस गैप देयर इज अ ट्रिगर इवेंट व्हिच इज इवेंट और कंडीशन, देयर माइट बी अ ट्रिगर इवेंट व्हिच इंडिकेट्स दैट देयर इज एन इम्पेयरमेंट. एनुअली चेक नहीं करते, ट्रिगर इवेंट पे चेक करते हैं. ओके सर, ट्रिगर इवेंट पे चेक करने के बाद व्हाट एग्जैक्टली एम आई सपोज्ड टू डू? देयर आर टू स्टेप्स दैट आई एम सपोज्ड टू फॉलो. फर्स्ट, रिकवरेबिलिटी टेस्ट, कि क्या इम्पेयरमेंट हुआ है, नहीं हुआ, यस और नो. एंड द सेकंड टेस्ट इज लॉस मेजरमेंट टेस्ट. सर अगर इम्पेयरमेंट हुआ है तो कितना हुआ, राइट? So asset is impaired. First test, recoverability test, guys. This tells us whether impairment has happened or not. We compare carrying value with the future undiscounted cash flows. We compare what? Carrying value with the future undiscounted cash flows. Okay, so you compare carrying value with the future undiscounted cash flows. What does that mean? जो भी मुझे इस asset से मिलने वाला है in the future, in terms of the use of the asset, whatever cash flow that I'm going to get from the use of the asset and the disposal, I don't take present value of it, I directly take it. वैल्यू इन यूज कैसे निकालते थे? प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ फ्यूचर कैश फ्लोज एंड द अमाउंट दैट यू गोइंग टू गेट फ्रॉम डिस्पोजल. यहाँ पे वो प्रेजेंट वैल्यू नहीं लेते, सीधा सीधा क्या लेते हैं? पूरा पूरा कैश फ्लो लेते हैं विदाउट टेकिंग द प्रेजेंट वैल्यू फ्रॉम यूज एंड फ्रॉम डिस्पोजल. ओके सर, फेयर इनफ. ओके, तो सर इफ माय carrying value is greater than what? If my carrying value is greater than this future undiscounted cash flow, that means my asset has impaired, yes. And sir, if the carrying value is lower than the future undiscounted cash flows, what happens? The asset has not impaired. So if this is the case, the asset is impaired, yes. And remember, it uses undiscounted cash flows. And sir, if this is the case, where the carrying value is more than undiscounted cash flows, that means impairment exists. And the second step tells us where I measure the loss, how much. How much? Okay, how much, sir? How do we compare that? We compare cost, basically carrying value and fair value of the asset. We compare what? Carrying value and the fair value of the asset. And if fair value is not available, we take present value of future cash flows. So, sir, impairment exists. Yes. How much? The carrying value is 100. Okay. The fair value is 95. Impairment is 5 rupees. Sir, but what if the fair value doesn't exist? Okay. Take the present value of future cash flows and amount of disposal. Right. And then whatever impairment loss is recognized in the income statement. And there is no reversal that is allowed in case of US GAAP. सर एक बार पूरा इम्पेयरमेंट रिवाइज कर लो तो बहुत इंपॉर्टेंट टॉपिक है. लेट अस क्विकली अंडरस्टैंड इम्पेयरमेंट. अगले 5 मिनट बहुत अच्छे से केयरफुली सुनना. आई एम गोइंग टू रिवाइज एंटायर इम्पेयरमेंट विद यू गाइस. सर वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इम्पेयरमेंट. व्हाट एग्जैक्टली डू मीन बाय इम्पेयरमेंट? सर इम्पेयरमेंट का मतलब ये होता है दैट इट इज डिक्लाइन इन द कैरिंग वैल्यू ऑफ द सॉरी इट इज डिक्लाइन इन द अर्निंग कैपेसिटी ऑफ द एसेट, बेसिकली लॉस इन द वैल्यू ऑफ द एसेट. ओके सर, इम्पेयरमेंट होता है, फेयर इनफ सर. इम्पेयरमेंट इज लॉस इन द वैल्यू ऑफ द एसेट. दैट मीन्स यू हैव टू रिकॉग्नाइज दैट इन इनकम स्टेटमेंट. यस वी डू. All right, fair enough, sir. Impairment, though, impairment is recognized in two different ways, in IFRS and in US GAAP. Sir, in IFRS, what happens in IFRS, sir? First things first, you are supposed to check for impairment either annually or when the trigger event exists. Sir, annually तो हर साल करना है. Trigger event, sir, there are 3-4 events. If they exist, I have to check for impairment. Okay, sir, fair enough. Sir, I have a doubt that impairment must have happened. Or, how do I confirm that doubt? I compare, carrying value with the recoverable value. Sir, carrying value, I understand, sir. It is the whatever the cost of the asset was minus the accumulated depreciation so far, or carrying value basically whatever is in the books of accounts. Sir, I compare that. Okay, sir, with recoverable value, what is recoverable value? Fair value less cost to sell. Recoverable value is higher of fair value less cost to sell, or value in use. Sir, what is value in use? It is present value of the future cash flows that I'm going to have from the asset and from the disposal of the asset. Okay, fair enough. Sir, if my carrying value is lower than the recoverable value, carrying value is 100, recoverable value is 90, that means asset has impaired by 10 rupees, right? That is how you check for impairment in case of IFRS and find out the amount. और जो भी इम्पेयरमेंट का अमाउंट होगा, इम्पेयरमेंट लॉस होगी 10 रुपीज़ की, वो कहाँ जाएगी? आपकी इनकम स्टेटमेंट में जाएगी. एंड रिवर्सल रूल, यू कैन ओनली रिवर्स इम्पेयरमेंट टू द एक्सटेंट ऑफ द carrying value, which is 100 rupees. If the impairment was at, if the recoverable value is 90 and it goes to 105, then you can only reverse till 100, which was the original carrying value from where you sort of impaired. तो उतना ही आप करोगे, उससे ज़्यादा नहीं करोगे. So 10 rupees is what you can reverse, nothing else. Sir, in case of US GAAP, sir, what happens in case of US GAAP? You are not supposed to check for impairment annually. You are only supposed to check when events or conditions exist. Events or conditions, technologically problem हो गई है, market value but decline हो गई है, stuff like that. Okay, sir. Then once that is done, if the event or condition exists, we have a doubt. Sir, the moment we have a doubt, we are supposed to go through two steps. Sir, what are those two steps? Sir, first step is recoverability test. Sir, recoverability test tells us whether impairment has happened, yes or no. Okay, sir. In recoverability test, what do I compare? I compare carrying value with the future undiscounted cash flows. If the carrying value is lower than the future undiscounted cash flows, then my asset is what? Then my asset is not lower than, sorry, carrying value is greater than the future undiscounted cash flows, then my asset is said to have been impaired. Okay, sir. What is future undiscounted cash flows? Cash flows that you are going to get in future with from the asset and from disposal. Okay, sir, fair enough. All right, we get that. So, sir, if carrying value is greater than undiscounted cash flows, impairment has happened. Yes. Sir, what is the amount of impairment? You compare carrying value and the cost. Sorry, carrying value and the fair value. Sir, आपने carrying value और fair value compare किया. Carrying value is 100, fair value is let's say 95. The asset is impaired by 5 rupees. Sir, if fair value is not available, तो क्या use करेंगे? Present value is the future undiscounted cash flows along with disposable amount. The amount you get on disposal. All right, that is what it is. Sir, क्या reversal allowed है use gap में? नहीं, reversal is not allowed. And that's how your impairment functions in case of IFRS and US GAAP. All right, guys. I hope, barring that mistake that I made, I hope you guys have been able to understand everything. Yes or no? Quickly tell me. Then we move forward. All right, let's move forward, guys. Let's move forward. Let's take an example quickly, sir. Original cost of the asset is how much? It is 12 lakhs, 1.2 million. Accumulated depreciation is how much? 2 lakhs. So what do you be the carrying value? So carrying value will be the original cost minus accumulated depreciation. Basically depreciation till date. So it is going to be what? 10 lakhs. Okay, sir. Expected future cash flows 9 lakh 80,000. Fair value 9 lakh 50,000. Value in use 940. Selling cost 40. Assuming Oak Ridge will continue to use the machinery, test for impairment under IFRS and US GAAP. I'm supposed to test for impairment under IFRS. How do I test for impairment? Sir, carrying value or recoverable amount, whichever is, sorry, whichever नहीं. If the basically you compare both of them and then you assess for impairment. Sir, कैसे compare करेंगे? Sir, let us first find out recoverable value. Recoverable value is fair value less cost to sell or value in use, whichever is higher. What? Fair value less cost to sell or value in use, whichever is higher. Fair value कितनी 9 lakh 50,000. Cost to sell is 40,000. That means 9 lakh 10,000 is my fair value less cost to sell. Or fair value in use. Value in use is present value of future cash flows. Present value is 9 lakh 40,000. So it comes to 9.4 lakhs. Ultimately, sir, recoverable amount will be 9 lakh 40,000, whichever is higher. Higher of the two is recoverable amount. Carrying value is how much? 10 lakhs. That means asset has been impaired by 60,000. Sir, in case of US gap, what do you do? Sir, in case of US gap, you have to check for impairment. Of course, sir, your indicator exists. That's why they have said that you check for impairment. तो first तो हो गया. Sir, अपने को क्या check करना है? अब recoverability test. Okay, sir, you compare what? Sir, you compare carrying value. With what, sir? You compare carrying value with, sir, with what? With undiscounted future cash flows. Sir, what are undiscounted future cash flows? 9 lakh 80,000. एक्सपेक्टेड फ्यूचर कैश फ्लोज दिए, प्रेजेंट वैल्यू नहीं दिए, तो ये क्या हुआ? अनडिस्काउंटेड फ्यूचर कैश फ्लोज. कितना हुआ? 9 lakh 80,000. So if you see your carrying value is how much? 10 lakhs. Carrying value is clearly greater than the undiscounted future cash flows, which is 9.8 lakhs. That means impairment has happened. Yes. Sir, second step is going to be what? Calculating the amount of impairment. Here you compare what? You compare the carrying value with what? With the fair value. Fair value कितनी है मेरी? 950. तो carrying value and fair value is compared. तो 9 lakh 50 carrying value is 10 lakh, fair value is 9 lakh 50. Carrying value is greater than the fair value. That means 50,000 rupees is going to be what? Your impairment. And that's how you calculate for impairment. All right. Guys, what happens because of impairment on financial statements? Sir, in terms of balance sheet, my assets value will go down for sure. And ultimately, what happens, sir? Ultimately, my total assets goes down because the value of the asset is going on. Total assets are going down. Sir, because of impairment, there's a loss that is shown in the income statement, and because of loss, my retained earnings goes down. And because of my retained earnings, what happens, sir? My equity goes down. So ultimately, impairment reduces my assets carrying value and also decreases my assets, total assets and my equity. Sir, what happens to income statement, sir? Because of impairment, what happens, sir? Because of impairment, ultimately my net income is reduced. So impairment reduces my net income. And if my net income is reduced, what happens? If my net income is reduced, what happens? Sir, return on equity and return on asset will also be impacted. Sir, but in case of return on assets, sir, it is net profit divided by assets. So net profit is going down, assets are also going down. So it should be fit to sna. The impact on net income is much more. I'll again repeat, the income impact on net income is much more than the assets. So, sir, if I talk about return on assets, it is net income divided by return on assets. The net income is falling by a lot more, and return on assets are also falling. अब दोनों ही गिरे तो ओवरऑल रेशियो भी कम होगा, बट ये समझो कि इम्पैक्ट ऑन नेट इनकम इज मच मोर देन द इम्पैक्ट ऑन एसेट्स. एक एक्स्ट्रा चीज बोली आपको, बट ओवरऑल द रेशियो विल गो डाउन. एंड रिटर्न ऑन इक्विटी, सर, रिटर्न ऑन इक्विटी विल बी नेट इनकम डिवाइड बाय वॉट एवर द इक्विटी इज. सर, दोनों ही नीचे जा रहे हैं तो ओवरऑल रेशियो भी नीचे जाएगा, बट द इम्पैक्ट ऑन नेट इनकम इज गोइंग टू बी मच मोर. Right. But subsequent years में क्या होगा? Sir, subsequent years में net income will go up. Why? Because now the assets carrying value is declined. Now, sorry, assets value is declined. Now, if the value is declined, what happens, sir? If it goes to 90, earlier it was at 100. If it goes to 90 because of impairment, depreciation expense will reduce. Because now you will depreciate the lower value. Now, because depreciation expense reduces, net income will increase. So, net income will go up due to lower depreciation and amortization on reduced asset base. And ultimately, if net income goes up, what happens? If net income goes up, sir, my overall ROE and ROEA will go up. Why? Because net income goes up. And what happens to cash flow statement? There is not going to be any immediate cash flow impact because impairment is a non-cash charge. If my assets value goes from 900 to 90, that doesn't mean that I'm spending 10 rupees. No, sir, that doesn't mean that I'm spending 10. That just means what? That just means that it's a non-cash charge. There is no expense that's happening. It's just the loss in the value of the asset. Right. and there is no effect on taxable income as well until the asset is disposed. Meaning, impairment is not recognized by whom? By income tax. तो इनकम टैक्स बोलते हैं इम्पेयरमेंट हमने रिकॉग्नाइज ही नहीं किया, तो हमारा तो इम्पेयरमेंट लॉस ही नहीं आया है, तो हमारा डेप्रिसिएशन वैसा के वैसा, हमारा अर्निंग्स नीचे ही नहीं गिरा, हमारा अर्निंग्स नीचे नहीं गिरा तो क्या होगा अल्टीमेटली? टैक्सेबल इनकम ज़्यादा ही आएगी, तो टैक्स ज़्यादा आएगा. वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट टैक्स बुक्स हियर बाय द वे गाइस, टॉकिंग अबाउट टैक्स बुक्स. नाउ एनालिसिस ऑफ इम्पेयरमेंट्स. नाउ इट इज आल्सो वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट दैट यू एनालाइज इम्पेयरमेंट. ये सब बहुत सिंपल है, इजी है, फटाफट फटाफट एक बार आपको मैं पढ़ा हूँ. हाउ डू यू, आई मीन व्हाट डू यू मीन बाय एनालिसिस ऑफ इम्पेयरमेंट सर? Sir, the impairment can possibly come from the fact that your carrying value was more than the recoverable value. Your carrying value was more. The reason can be because you did not charge enough depreciation in the earlier years, and that made your carrying value be, be much more. So it indicates insufficient depreciation and amortization in prior periods. So basically, सर अगर आपने insufficient depreciation charge किया, amortization charge किया, तो आपकी prior period की earnings ज़्यादा है. ओके, इफ अर्निंग्स ज्यादा है क्योंकि आपने डेप्रिसिएशन कम चार्ज किया, दैट मींस यू आर मैनेजिंग अर्निंग्स. यस, chances are you are managing earnings. That is what it is. Also, it is very important that impairment is at the judgment of the management. कैसे? ये सब जो वैल्यूज आपने निकाली वो जजमेंट है मैनेजमेंट की. तो मैनेजमेंट को जब चाहिए इम्पेयरमेंट कर सकता है. बेसिकली दिस ईयर वाज डैम गुड एंड द प्रॉफिट्स वर डैम गुड. मैनेजमेंट वांट्स टू शो कंसिस्टेंसी इन प्रॉफिट्स, क्योंकि लास्ट ईयर प्रॉफिट्स थोड़े कम थे, इस साल एकदम बढ़ गए, तो लोगों को लगेगा कि यार ओके, मैनेजमेंट इज नॉट कंसिस्टेंट, सो इट वांटेड टू मैनेज प्रॉफिट्स, इट डिड इम्पेयरमेंट. So you can also time impairment that would result in an earning manipulation. Right. That is what it is. So again, all of this is what is going to be indicated by that. Again, not a lot of discussion I want to do here because ये बहुत simple है, बहुत cause and effect kind of a thing है. So I think not very relevant, I feel. Investor considerations. Frequent or large impairments may signal poor forecasting, asset overpayment और declining industry condition. बहुत ज़्यादा impairment हो रही है, बहुत बार हो रही है, इसका मतलब क्या होगा? सर ये हो सकता है कि जो फोरकास्ट कर रहे हैं हमारे एनालिस्ट वो प्रॉपरली फोरकास्ट ना कर पाए, ओवर पेमेंट हो जाए एसेट. एसेट से रिलेटेड, यू कैन बेसिकली ओवर पे फॉर द एसेट्स, एंड इंडस्ट्री इज नॉट वर्किंग वेरी वेल और इज नॉट डूइंग वेरी वेल बिकॉज यहाँ पे एसेट्स की वैल्यू डिक्लाइन हो रही है. मतलब सर इस इंडस्ट्री के जो एसेट्स है उसकी वैल्यू डिक्लाइन हो रही है, तो पॉसिबली इंडस्ट्री की वैल्यू डिक्लाइन हो रही है. And obviously, you need to adjust the valuation models for the same. Again, not a lot to discuss here. Sir, we do understand intangible assets with indefinite lives. Goodwill. Are they amortized? No. Because I don't know for how long do I have to amortize them. With finite life, I know 5 years I have to amortize them. With indefinite life, I don't know for how long do I have to amortize it. That's the first thing. Okay, sir, but are they tested for impairment? Yes. I'm supposed to test them for impairment at least annually. An impairment loss is recognized if the carrying amount is greater than the fair value. Right. Examples can be, broadcasting license that you have. Generally, this is finite life. ये थोड़ा सा आप इग्नोर करो. Brand name with indefinite legal protection can be. Okay, sir, fair enough. Now, the next topic is long-lived assets that are held for sale. Sir, I had an asset. Okay, fair enough. Which I was using for my own use in the business. Okay, so it was a long-lived asset, basically an asset with uh, with a what do you call, a very long life. That asset basically was held for use, but now I've decided I don't want to sort of use that asset anymore. I want to sell that asset in the middle of its life. So it had a life of 10 years. I wanted to sell it at the end of 6 years. अब मैंने जिस टाइम सोचा उसी दिन तुरंत बिक जाएगा क्या? नो सर, इट विल टेक टाइम. But should I still continue to classify that as an asset which is held for use in my business? No. It needs to be reclassified. till the end of sixth year, that asset, long-lived assets, that was recognized as what? It was recognized as an asset that is what? An asset that is held for use. But what will happen at the end of sixth year, sir? It will be classified as held for a sale. Reclassification should happen. Sir, why do we need to reclassify? Because the day I thought that I want to sell it, I'll not be able to necessarily sell it. It will take time. And once you classify that as held for sale, you no longer depreciate or amortize it. Why? Because depreciation is wear and tear of asset. It indicates that you're using the asset. But the moment you classify an asset as held for sale, you don't use it anymore. It is not held for use, and that makes the asset's depreciation stop. सर मतलब असेट में वेर एंड टेयर नहीं होगा क्या? नो. सर ऐसा कैसे बोल रहे हो? असेट पड़ा रहेगा तो वेर एंड टेयर होगा ना? हाँ. बट याद करो, मैंने आपको जब पढ़ाया था, मैंने क्या बोला था? व्हाट डिड आई टेल यू गाइस? वेर एंड टेयर इज जस्ट अ वे टू यूज इट. एक्चुअली आप क्या कर रहे हो? आप आपका एक्सपेंस को प्रोपोर्शनेटली रिकॉग्नाइज कर रहे हो इन द फॉर्म ऑफ डेप्रिसिएशन. आपने एक मशीनरी खरीदी 1 लाख रुपीज की. योर डेप्रिसिएशन, योर लाइफ इज 5 years, योर डेप्रिसिएशन विल बी 20,000 रुपीज एवरी ईयर. ओके सर. That 20,000 rupees that is recognized every year is just for matching concept. It is way of recognizing expenses. That recognition will stop. Okay. Sir, impairment measure कैसे करेंगे सर in this case? Which case? Sir, assets that are held for sale. Sir, impairment क्यों measure करना है? On reclassification, I need to measure impairment of the asset. On reclassification, I need to measure for impairment of the asset. Sir, कैसे compare करेंगे? Sir, carrying value should be greater than the fair value less cost to sell for the asset to be impaired. What? On reclassification of an asset which was held for use from held for use to held for sale, what will happen? In that case, I will check for impairment, and impairment will happen if the carrying value of the asset is greater than the fair value less cost to sell. याद करो, ऊपर वाले इससे कंफ्यूज मत होना. ऊपर जो इम्पेयरमेंट था वो अलग था. ये असेट हेल्ड फॉर यूज से हेल्ड फॉर सेल रिकॉग्नाइज हो रहा है. दैट्स व्हाई वी आर चेकिंग फॉर इम्पेयरमेंट. और डिफरेंस नहीं दिया है तो मतलब आईएफआरएस और यूएस गैप में सेम है, वहां भी कंफ्यूज मत होना. तो इफ द कैरिंग वैल्यू इज ग्रेटर देन द फेयर वैल्यू लेस कॉस्ट टू सेल, द असेट इज सेड टू बी इम्पेयर्ड. तो रिटर्न तो असेट इम्पेयर्ड हो गया. ओके. तो सर ये तो मुझे सिर्फ बताया इम्पेयरमेंट. वेदर द इम्पेयरमेंट हैज हैपेंड, यस और नो. याद करो रिकवरेबिलिटी टेस्ट, एग्जैक्टली लाइक दैट. वेदर द इम्पेयरमेंट हैज हैपेंड और नॉट. एंड इफ द कैरिंग वैल्यू इज ग्रेटर देन द फेयर वैल्यू लेस कॉस्ट टू सेल, इम्पेयरमेंट हैज हैपेंड. और कितना हुआ है वो ये वाला स्टेप बोलेगा आपको. You will write down the asset to NRV, which is net realizable value, and loss will be recognized in the income statement. तो जो भी उस एसेट की नेट रियलाइजेबल वैल्यू है, बेसिकली एस्टिमेटेड सेलिंग प्राइस माइनस एस्टिमेटेड सेलिंग कॉस्ट. व्हाट? एस्टिमेटेड सेलिंग प्राइस माइनस एस्टिमेटेड सेलिंग कॉस्ट. वॉट एवर द एनआरवी इज, यू रिकॉग्नाइज द एसेट एट एनआरवी. तो आपका असेट का कैरिंग वैल्यू 100 था, फेयर वैल्यू लेस कॉस्ट टू सेल था 90. आपका असेट इंपेयर हो गया. यस. Now NRV of that asset is 85. You will recognize that asset at 85, and 15 rupees will be recognized at was 15 rupees will be recognized as what? Loss due to impairment that resulted from classification, reclassification. Okay. सर क्या रिवर्सल परमिटेड है? इसमें रिवर्सल क्या परमिटेड है? यस. सर सबसे पहले तो यहाँ एनआरवी क्यों आ गया सर? यहाँ एनआरवी क्यों आ गया सर? अभी तक तो अपन एनआरवी की कोई बात ही नहीं की. एनआरवी तो सर पिछले चैप्टर में पढ़ा था, इन्वेंट्रीज वाले. Up until now, we have not spoken about inventory, about NRV at all. So why have you started talking about NRV suddenly? Why is NRV even relevant here? Because the asset now becomes held for sale. And remember, you sell your stock exactly like that. You're selling something here, and whenever you sell your stock, you recognize that stock at NRV. Like that, in taking inspiration from there, you sort of take NRV here as well. That is the logic. All right, sir. Fair enough. Okay, okay, okay. Sir, how exactly the reversal of loss will happen? Sir, same. meaning till the extent of original cost. Basically, original impairment loss. Your original impairment loss is 15. Suddenly, the NRV of the asset, let's say, has gone to 105. You are recognizing the asset at 85. There is reversal. There is reversal. Okay, sir, till what extent should I do it? Only till the extent of 15, that is till 100, which is the original cost. Now, when I keep on saying original cost, मतलब मैं originally जहाँ से आपने impairment किया था वहां से बात करता हूँ. Whenever I talk about original cost, I'm talking about originally where did you impair from? That's what I'm talking about. The reversal of the loss is limited to the original impairment loss. That is 15. That is how much you can, reverse maximum. Not more than that. And post the reversal, of course, the carrying value cannot exceed the value that was before the impairment loss. Basically ओरिजिनल कॉस्ट में बार बार ओरिजिनल कॉस्ट मतलब वो ओरिजिनल कॉस्ट नहीं. आपको पहले भी इम्पेयरमेंट जब बोला मैंने ओरिजिनल कॉस्ट का मतलब ये नहीं था कि यार वो सर ओरिजिनल कॉस्ट मतलब जिस पे खरीदा था वो. अरे नहीं नहीं, जहाँ से इम्पेयरमेंट किया था वो कॉस्ट. बेसिकली दैट कैरिंग वैल्यू. So it can maximum rise to 100, not more than 100. That is what the tell is. And that was your loss reversal. Sir, now you, at the start of impairment, you started discussing something which is called as impairment, or something which is called as derecognition. Okay. Sir, but एक बार impairment देख ले क्या वापस? Okay. Impairment, initially we spoke about impairment in US GAAP in IFRS. Okay. Then post that, what do we talk about? Impairment, if impact on financial assets, on financial statements. Sorry. How do you analyze the impairment? All of those things. Again, pretty theoretical, right? Then we started discussing about what? Impairment of two special categories of assets. First, intangible assets with indefinite lives. Okay. You have to check for that impairment annually. If the carrying amount is greater than the fair value, then you're supposed to impair the asset. Okay. The second special category was long-lived assets held for sale. They are classified from held for use to held for sale. The moment they are reclassified, you're supposed to check for impairment. And when you check for impairment, the first step has to be whether impairment has happened or not by comparing it with fair value less cost to sell. What comparing it? Carrying value. And if the impairment has happened, you compare the with NRV to calculate how much the impairment has happened. The first step is whether impairment has happened or not happened, and the second step is what? How much impairment has happened. And I hope you guys have been able to understand everything very well. Right. And of course, reversal is not allowed, is allowed in US GAAP in IFRS in both the cases, and only till the limit of the original impairment loss. Guys, with me so far, understood everything. Let's move forward. Let us go to re-recognition of long-term assets. Three more topics left in this chapter, then we are done with this chapter as well. Guys, tomorrow I'll be taking more time. I hope you guys understand. From 11 to 5, we'll be sitting tomorrow. Three more topics left in this chapter, then we are done. Guys, tomorrow I'll be taking more time. 11 to 5, we'll be sitting tomorrow. Yes or no, guys, quickly. ब्रेक चाहिए क्या? यार मेरी एनर्जी नहीं जा रही, तुम्हारी एनर्जी क्यों जा रही है? हाँ या ना बोलो यार. Apart from me, there are 17 people in the live. I want everyone to say yes or no. Come on, guys. I'm waiting. I don't mind. लाइव का थोड़ा ड्यूरेशन बढ़ जाएगा और कुछ नहीं. All right, I think the energy levels are low. Do you guys want a 5-10 minutes break so that we can continue after the break as well? Don't worry. My intention today also is to just teach you guys what do you mean by deferred taxes. Nothing else. I'm not going to go beyond basically the sec the what do you call it? 50% of the chapter is what we intend to discuss today. Nothing else. So do you guys want a 5 minutes break? Yes or no? फटाफट बोलो यार. I know कि लैग के साथ भी होता है तो टाइम भी वेट करना पड़ता है यार. बट फटाफट बोलो. Yes want a break? Yes or no? Okay, do one thing. Take a 5 minutes break. It's 4-6. Take a 5 minutes break. We'll again continue. ठीक है? All right, I hope you guys are back. Let's get started again. We're not talking about derecognition. Now, what do you mean by derecognition? When an asset is completely removed from my books of accounts, basically balance sheet. Sir, when can an asset be completely removed from my account? First, it is either sold. Second, it is either exchanged with something else. Or third, it is abandoned, basically disposed of completely. So these are the different reasons why my asset can be derecognized. Sir, if the asset is sold, we understand how exactly the accounting treatment would be. Sir, basically the asset is sold, we remove it from the balance sheet completely. We calculate the gain or loss. How exactly is the gain or loss calculated? 100 rupees is what I've sold it as. 80 rupees was the carrying value of the asset, 20 rupees is my gain. So sale proceeds minus the carrying value before disposal. How do I calculate the carrying value before disposal? Remember, if I'm selling the asset, remember if I'm selling the asset, before selling, I have to make sure that impair, I check for impairment. My bad, not impair. Check for impairment. Okay. So, sir, fair enough. So, when I'm comparing and calculating the gain or loss, I take the sale proceeds minus carrying value. How would the carrying value be calculated? So, it would simply be original cost minus the accumulated depreciation minus whatever the impairment charges are. I hope you guys are clear with the logic of accumulated depreciation. I don't think I need to repeat that here. But the point is, you consider impairment and the gain or loss is reported in the income statement. And if the gain or loss is material, basically it is significant or huge, you will show that as an unusual or infrequent item. And in case of cash flow statement, what will happen? Whatever sale proceeds you have received will be shown as cash flow from investing. And if you're using indirect method, the gain or loss will be removed from the net income to avoid double counting. Remember, right? You will remove that whenever you're using, you're calculating what do you call your indirect method, your cash flow from operations via indirect method. You're supposed to remove this, and must have done in examples. If the asset is abandoned, what happened? Sir, I've abandoned it. I've completely disposed it of. Imagine I have sort of, just dumped it in the dump yard. Okay. So, sir, here the sale proceeds are zero. Carrying value is there. So, sir, the entire carrying value is my loss? Yes. And the asset is removed from the balance sheet. So, entire carrying value becomes my loss and the asset is removed from the balance sheet. And sir, if the asset is exchanged, then what happens? If the asset is exchanged, then what happens? How would I calculate the gain or loss? It is pretty simple. It is pretty simple. I compare the fair value of the old asset with the carrying value of the old asset. Simple as that. So let's say, for example, the asset that I have ended up exchanging. So there was an asset. I exchanged this asset with another asset. The gain or loss on this exchange will be recognized as how? The fair value of the asset that I have given up, the old asset. I will compare that with the carrying value of the old asset. And if the fair value of the old asset cannot be easily determined, I use the fair value of the new asset. And ultimately, old asset is obviously removed from the books of accounts and new asset is recorded at a fair value. So, sir, the fair value of the asset that I had given up was 100 and the carrying value was 80. I have gotten a gain of 20 on what? On exchange. And if this fair value of the old asset is not available, I'll take the fair value of the new asset, which is let's say 90 minus 80, that will come to let's say 100, that will come to 10. 10 is my gain. So 90 is the fair value of the new asset, 80 rupees is the carrying value of the old asset. I will get 10 rupees as gain. And sir, the new asset will be recognized at the fair value of the new asset, which is 90 rupees. Right? In this case. Sir, what do you mean by spin-off? What do you mean by spin-off? Let's say, for example, Ford selling one of its divisions called JLR. That is called as spin-off, where a company transfer assets that make up an entire division or subsidiary into a new legal entity. So basically, Ford has transferred all the assets that belong to one of its, division or subsidiary called as JLR and then sold it to Tata Motors. Obviously, the shares of the new entity, which is the Spinny, are then distributed to the existing shareholders of the parent company, basically Spinner, without the shareholders surrendering any of their shares in the parent. Sir, what do you mean by that? Let us take an example. Before spin-off, there's a parent company, company A, let's call that Ford, and there is subsidiary company or division, let's call that company B, basically JLR. Shareholders own the shares of company A only. Whoever are the shareholders, they obviously own the company shares of A only. They own the shares of A only. So company A had a division called JLR, or Ford had a division called JLR. The shareholders of Ford own the shares of Ford only. Okay, fair enough. So, sir, if JLR is being sold to Tata Motors, what will happen? Uh, sir, the shareholders of A, basically Ford, would want something in return. Right? Okay. What do they want in return? They would want the shares of Tata Motors in return. Right? So the shareholders of Ford will become, in some capacity, shareholders of Tata Motors. Okay. So now JLR is become a part of Tata Motors, which is company B now. Let's call that company B. Shareholders of A would now become the shareholders of B as well. That is how the whole thing would function. All right. अगर ये वाले एग्जांपल से नहीं समझ आ रहा, कंफ्यूजन हो रही है, तो लेट मी जस्ट टेक अ वेरी वेरी सिंपल एग्जांपल व्हिच दीस पीपल हैव गिवन. What have they done? They have taken company A. They have said that company A, the shareholders of company A, okay, are there. And sir, company A ultimately has a division called B. There are no shares that are issued of company B. Company B is just a division of company A. Ultimately, what company A does is sort of, bifurcates this company, removes this company, and ultimately, decides that it will sell it to somebody else. Okay, that is company B. Ultimately, company B is created now. Okay, so Ford, trying to create a new company called JLR. So, okay, and then fair enough, sir, but the shareholders of A would want something in return for selling the division B. And ideally, that would be the shares of division B, which is created as a new company altogether. So, sir, shareholders of A will become the shareholders of A and also of shareholders of B. That is what the point is, nothing else. तो ऐसे समझना ऐसे समझो, जो मैंने समझा वैसे समझना तो वैसे समझ लो. अकाउंटिंग ट्रीटमेंट व्हेन अ स्पिन ऑफ इज प्रोबेबल, कि भाई स्पिन ऑफ होने वाला है, assets and liabilities of the spinny are reclassified. Sir, basically in the books of Ford, whatever were the assets and liabilities of JLR will be reclassified as what? As from held for use to held for sale. From held for use to held for sale. And assets held for sale in this case are referred to as assets held for distribution. क्यों? क्योंकि आप इन assets को distribute करोगे. As Ford, you will distribute the assets of JLR to Tata Motors. Hence, assets held for sale is not literally held for sale. You are not literally selling one asset. What you're doing is you're distributing these assets all together and liabilities all together to whom? To Tata Motors. And no profit or loss is recorded in the income statement upon distribution. क्यों? क्योंकि आपने एक asset नहीं बेचा. It is not actually a sale of asset for you to recognize the gain or loss on the sale of asset. Right? That is what it is. ओनरशिप स्ट्रक्चर, शेयर होल्डर्स गेट द शेयर्स इन बोथ एंटिटीज पोस्ट स्पिन ऑफ. तो जो भी शेयर होल्डर्स ए के थे उनको दोनों में मिल जाएगा. ए में मिल जाएगा शेयर्स और बी ए में तो था ही, बी में भी मिल जाएगा शेयर्स. सो दे वर शेयर होल्डर्स इन ए बट दे विल आल्सो गेट शेयर्स इन बी एज वेल. Consolidation impact, the Spinny's results are removed from the parent's consolidated accounts. Meaning, whenever Ford is making its accounts, earlier it used to include JLR's results in its accounts. Now there is no need to do that anymore. And classification shift, held for use from held for sale. We've discussed that. Like the assets of JLR in the books of Ford will were earlier recognized as held for use, but now it will be recognized as held for sale. Great. So what do you mean by fixed asset turnover? Fixed asset turnover is my revenue divided by assets. Right. It tells me what is the efficiency with which I am using my assets. So if my fixed asset turnover is, let's say, 10%, and other companies' fixed asset turnover is 12%, that means for every 1 rupee of fixed asset, it is generating zero point 0.1 revenue. This same other company for this for is generating on 1 rupee of assets 12 zero point 0.12 of revenue. That means this company is more efficient, sir, in terms of using its asset. So higher, the better it is. Why? Because it ultimately tells us what? It ultimately tells us that your assets are generating more sales. But you have to also watch out for how aged your assets are. Sir, what do you mean by that? We'll have about discussion on that, don't worry. But what do you mean by age? Age is where the assets are in its life. Are they very close to the end of their life? Are they not very close to end of their life, but they are, somewhere in the middle, or the assets are very early in its life? Can be anything. Where can you get this information? From footnotes of the company. You can understand what the depreciation method, useful life, salvage value, gross versus accumulated depreciation, what is the kind of capex that might be there. Sir, capex कैसे पता चला? From the asset's age. That the asset is very old and it's very old and very close to the end of its useful life. Uh, so the age is lot that might trigger capex. So older assets might reduce your competitive edge, right? Older assets might reduce your competitive edge. And older assets will sort of trigger a capex requirement for your company. So if capex is going to happen, that means you have to incur capital expenditure. That means you will need money. That means you might have to raise debt. You might have to raise debt, equity, or probably, preference capital, or some or the other way you'll have to sort of arrange for funds. So, sir, what does fixed asset turnover tells us? What does fixed asset turnover tells us? It tells us how efficiently you're using your fixed assets. So, if my fixed asset turnover is 12%, that means for every 1 rupee of asset that I have, 0.12 is the revenue that I'm generating. If it is zero point 0.1 for every 1 rupee of asset that I have, I'm generating zero point 0.1 of revenue. Higher it is, the better it is. But at the same time, I have to make sure that whenever I'm assessing these ratios, I have to make sure that what is the average age of your fixed asset that matters. So if the average age is a lot, that means huge capex might be incoming. Okay, sir, fair enough. That's how it is. Now, how do you calculate the average age, the total useful life, and the remaining useful life? So what do you mean by that? I want to calculate the average age of my asset. I want to calculate the total useful life, the remaining useful life. Sir, इसका मतलब क्या? ले लो ना सीधा सीधा. What if it is not given to me and I have to calculate it? Let us try to calculate that. Let's say the following information is given to us at the end of the financial year 2017. The gross PP is 8 lakh, sorry, 80 lakhs. Accumulated depreciation is 3.2, 32 lakhs. Ending net PP is obviously, sir, 80 lakhs minus 32 lakhs, that comes to 48 lakhs. Annual depreciation expense is 8 lakhs. Every year, the depreciation expense that you are incurring is 8 lakhs. Now you are told that calculate the average age, the total useful life, and the remaining useful life. How do I calculate this, sir? Average age is very simple. You just have to take whatever the accumulated depreciation is. So 48 lakhs is my accumulated depreciation. Every year I'm charging 8 lakhs. That just tells me that how much years of depreciation has been charged so far. Right. सॉरी अपने डेफिनेशन मैंने आपको वो ले लिया सॉरी मैंने मैंने यहाँ पे आपका ये ले लिया एंडिंग नेट पीपी ले लिया accumulated depreciation is 32 lakhs. So it tells me 4 years have passed so far. So the age of my asset is 4 years because I have charged depreciation of 4 years. Because every year depreciation is this, and I have charged this much depreciation so far. That tells me how many years of depreciation has been charged so far. Sir, what exactly is total useful life? How do I calculate total useful life? All I have to take is what? All I have to take is my historical cost, which is 80 lakhs, and divided by what? Divided by my annual depreciation expense, which is 8 lakhs. That gives me 10 years of useful life. ये टोटल होने वाला है मेरा depreciation because original cost is going to be completely depreciated. Divided by 8, which is the annual depreciation. तो मुझे मिल जाएगा मेरा क्या? Useful life. And remaining useful life, how do I calculate? So remaining useful life is very simple. आपका ending net PPE कितना था? Basically, what was your closing PPE at the end of 2017? Sir, it was 48 lakhs. I divided by what? My annual depreciation, which is 8 lakhs. I will get what? I will get 6 years as my remaining useful life. Because 4 years I've already passed. I have charged depreciation worth 4 years. I've charged 32 lakhs. So far, 48 lakhs is yet to be charged. I divided by 8, I get 6 years. And that's how you calculate these different metrics of average age, total useful life, and remaining useful life. And that wraps up our complete discussion on this chapter, which is analysis of long-term assets. And let's go to our most important chapter, which is analysis of income tax. Is everyone with me so far? Yes or no? So that we can start our analysis of income tax. I will take maximum half an hour from here to be able to finish up everything with respect to how exactly DT is calculated, how exactly DTL is calculated.